Welcome to Ian Cinema, your destination for endless entertainment and unforgettable movie moments. Discover exciting films, inspiring stories, and cinematic journeys across every genre. Whether you love action, drama, thrillers, or timeless favorites, there's always something waiting for you here. Sit back, enjoy the experience, and let Ian Cinema bring the magic of movies to your screen. Goodfellas is a 1990 American biographical gangster film directed by Martin Scorsese, who co-wrote the screenplay with Nicholas Pileggi. Produced by Irwin Winkler, the film is based on Pileggi's 1985 non-fiction book Wise Guy. It stars Robert De Niro, Ray Liotta, Joe Pesci, Lorraine Bracco, and Paul Sorvino. The story follows the rise and eventual downfall of mafia associate Henry Hill, chronicling his life, friendships, and family from 1955 to 1980. Scorsese originally planned to title the film Wise Guy and delayed production for some time before deciding on the name Goodfellas. To prepare for their roles, Robert De Niro, Joe Pesci, and Ray Liotta spent time speaking with Nicholas Pileggi, who shared his research and first-hand material from writing the book. Many memorable moments in the film came from improvisation during rehearsals, where Scorsese encouraged the cast to perform freely. He recorded these sessions, selected the strongest dialogue, and incorporated it into the final screenplay used during filming. Goodfellas premiered at the 47th Venice International Film Festival on September 9, 1990, where Martin Scorsese won the Silver Lion Award for Best Director. The film was released in the United States on September 19, 1990, by Warner Bros., made on a budget of approximately $25 million. It earned around $47 million at the worldwide box office and received widespread critical acclaim. The film earned 6 Academy Award nominations, including Best Picture and Best Director, with Joe Pesci winning the Oscar for Best Supporting Actor. It also won 5 BAFTA awards, including Best Film and Best Director, and was named the year's best film by numerous critics organizations. Widely regarded as one of the greatest gangster films ever made, Goodfellas is often considered one of Martin Scorsese's finest achievements. The critical consensus on Rotten Tomatoes describes it as arguably the high point of Martin Scorsese's career. In 2000, the film was selected for preservation in the United States National Film Registry by the Library of Congress for being culturally, historically, and aesthetically significant. Its storytelling style, visual techniques, and influence have inspired countless films and television productions. The story begins in 1955, when teenage Henry Hill becomes fascinated by the mafia's influence in the Italian-American neighborhood of East New York, Brooklyn. He starts working for local crime boss Paulie Cicero alongside Jimmy Conway, an Irish-American gangster and truck hijacker, and Tommy DeVito, a hot-headed young criminal known for his violent temper. Henry starts by helping Jimmy sell stolen goods but gradually becomes involved in more serious crimes. By 1965, he begins dating Karen Friedman, a Jewish-American woman who is initially disturbed by Henry's criminal lifestyle. However, she is eventually drawn to the excitement, wealth, and glamour surrounding him, and the two marry despite her parents' objections. As the years pass, Henry, Jimmy, and Tommy become increasingly successful through car thefts, hijacking cargo trucks from JFK Airport, and eventually carrying out the famous Air France robbery in 1967. On June 11, 1970, Billy Batts, a made member of the Gambino crime family who has recently been released from prison, insults Tommy at a nightclub owned by Henry. Enraged, Tommy and Jimmy brutally beat Batts, believing they have killed him. Realizing that murdering a made man without permission will bring severe retaliation, Henry, Jimmy, and Tommy transport the body to upstate New York to bury it. When they discover Batts is still alive, They stab and shoot him to death before burying him. 6 months later, Jimmy learns that the burial site is scheduled for construction, forcing the trio to dig up a decomposing body and move it to another location. In 1974, Karen discovers that Henry has been having an affair with his mistress, Janice, and confronts him at gunpoint. Henry briefly moves in with Janice, but Paulie orders him to return to his wife after collecting money from a gambler in Tampa with Jimmy. The mission goes wrong when the gambler's sister, an FBI typist, reports them to authorities. Henry and Jimmy are arrested and both receive 10-year prison sentences. While serving time, Henry continues making money by having Karen smuggle drugs into prison from Pittsburgh, allowing him to sell narcotics to fellow inmates and support his family. Henry is paroled in 1978 and secretly expands his cocaine business with Jimmy and Tommy, ignoring Paulie's strict orders to stay away from drugs. Jimmy later assembles a crew to rob the Lufthansa vault at JFK Airport, stealing approximately $6 million in cash and jewelry. After several members of the crew ignore Jimmy's instructions by spending lavishly and the getaway truck is discovered by police, Jimmy begins eliminating those involved to avoid being connected to the crime. Only Henry and Tommy are spared. Henry remains valuable because of his profitable drug operation, while Tommy is expected to become a made man. However, Tommy is instead lured to a fake initiation ceremony in 1979 and murdered as revenge for killing Billy Batts. By 1980, Henry has become deeply addicted to cocaine and increasingly paranoid. Despite his deteriorating condition, he arranges another drug deal with his Pittsburgh associates. Before it can be completed, narcotics agents arrest him and send him back to jail. After Henry is released on bail, Karen reveals that she flushed $60,000 worth of cocaine down the toilet during an FBI raid to prevent the drugs from being discovered. The decision saves Henry from additional charges but leaves the Hill family completely broke. Feeling betrayed by Henry's involvement in drug dealing and realizing that he had become a serious liability, Paulie gives him $3,200 out of pity before cutting all ties with him. Without Paulie's protection, Henry is left vulnerable to Jimmy, making him an easy target. When Jimmy later asks Henry to travel for what is supposedly a hit assignment, Henry immediately becomes suspicious. Realizing that Jimmy intends to have him killed, Henry decides to cooperate with the authorities. He becomes an informant and enters the witness protection program with his family. His testimony and evidence help secure the convictions of Paulie and Jimmy, after which he relocates to an undisclosed neighborhood under government protection. Reflecting on his new life, Henry admits that he misses the excitement and chaos of the gangster world, feeling as though he has been sentenced to live the ordinary, uneventful life of an average snook. Goodfellas is based on New York crime reporter Nicholas Pileggi's best-selling book Wise Guy. Although Martin Scorsese had not planned to direct another mafia film, he came across a review of Pileggi's book while working on The Color of Money in 1986. Fascinated by organized crime for years, Scorsese believed Wise Guy offered the most honest and realistic portrayal of gangsters he had ever encountered. After reading the book, Scorsese immediately envisioned the film's unique style. He wanted Goodfellas to begin with the impact of a gunshot and continue accelerating in pace, almost like a 2.5-hour movie trailer. His goal was to immerse audiences in the excitement of the gangster lifestyle while also showing why so many people were drawn to it. According to Pileggi, Scorsese called him unexpectedly and said, "I've been waiting for this book my entire life." Pileggi famously replied, "I've been waiting for this phone call my entire life." Scorsese temporarily postponed the project when financing became available for The Last Temptation of Christ in 1988. However, he remained deeply attracted to the documentary-like realism of Pileggi's book, rather than focusing only on dramatic crimes. The book explored the everyday routines of gangsters to their businesses, control of nightclubs, and daily operations, revealing how organized crime actually functioned. Scorsese later described Goodfellas as the third film in an unofficial trilogy examining the lives of Italian Americans from different perspectives. He often referred to it as a mob movie, explaining that, at its core, the story is really about money because that is what the gangster's business revolves around. 2 weeks before filming began, the real Henry Hill received approximately $480,000 for the rights connected to his story. Scorsese and Nicholas Pileggi worked closely on a screenplay. After going through 12 drafts, Pileggi realized that the script required a completely different visual approach, leading the two to share screenplay credit. Rather than following the book chapter by chapter, they selected their favorite sections and assembled them like building blocks. Scorsese deliberately avoided a traditional narrative structure. Instead, he wanted the story to unfold through episodes, moving freely backward and forward in time. He also shortened many scenes, believing that their rapid pace would build incredible momentum as the film progressed. The extensive narration was inspired by Mathilde Section-Way's Truffaut's 1962 classic Jules and Jim, along with the innovative techniques of the French New Wave, including quick editing, freeze frames, and energetic storytelling. This marked the first time since Mean Streets that Scorsese received a co-writing credit. Several real-life gangsters' names were changed for the film. Tommy DeSimone became Tommy DeVito, borrowing the name of Joe Pesci's friend and former Four Seasons guitarist, Tommy DeVito. Though the character had no connection to the musician, Paul Sorvino became Paul Cicero, while Jimmy the Gent Burke became Jimmy Conway, based on Burke's birth surname. The project was originally titled Wise Guy, matching Pileggi's book. However, Scorsese and Pileggi changed the title to Goodfellas because similar titles had already been used by Brian De Palma's 1986 film Wise Guys and the television series Wise Guy. Once Robert De Niro agreed to portray Jimmy Conway, Scorsese was finally able to secure the financing needed to produce the film. Ray Liotta, who played Henry Hill, had read Wise Guy shortly after its publication and was captivated by the story. A few years later, his agent informed him that Scorsese was directing the film adaptation. Throughout 1988, Liotta met with Scorsese several times and aggressively pursued the role. Although Warner Brothers initially preferred a bigger star, Liotta later joked that the studio would probably have chosen Eddie Murphy over him. Ultimately, Scorsese cast Liotta after Robert De Niro recommended him, having been impressed by his performance in Jonathan Demme's Something Wild, 1986. Scorsese himself was struck by Liotta's explosive screen presence. Several other actors were considered for major roles. Al Pacino and John Malkovich were both candidates for Jimmy Conway, while Sean Penn, Alec Baldwin, Val Kilmer, and Tom Cruise were considered for Henry Hill. To prepare for his performance, Robert De Niro studied Nicholas Pileggi's unused research materials and frequently called Henry Hill, asking detailed questions about Jimmy Burke's habits, body language, and mannerisms, including how he walked and even how he held a cigarette. Ray Liotta also immersed himself in the role by listening to FBI surveillance recordings of Henry Hill during his daily commute, carefully studying Hill's voice and speech patterns. Madonna was reportedly considered for the role of Karen Hill. Lorraine Bracco, who ultimately played Karen, attempted to connect with the wife of a real mobster but found the tightly knit mafia community impossible to access. She eventually chose not to meet the real Karen Hill, believing it was better to create the character through her own interpretation. Paul Sorvino had little difficulty developing Paul Cicero's distinctive voice and walk. His greatest challenge, however, was portraying the character's emotional coldness and ruthless nature, qualities he felt were completely opposite to his own personality. Former Eastern District of New York prosecutor Edward A. McDonald appeared in the film as himself, recreating the conversation he originally had with Henry and Karen Hill about entering the witness protection program. A friend of Nicholas Pileggi, MacDonald was cast almost by accident after joking with a location scout that he would gladly play himself if needed. Pileggi called him an hour later, and the role became his. The courtroom scene was largely unscripted, with MacDonald improvising the memorable line describing Karen as a babe in the woods. Filming took place during the spring and summer of 1989 across Queens, upstate New York, New Jersey, and parts of Long Island on a production budget of approximately $25 million, according to Scorsese. Principal photography concluded on August 14, 1989. Because of the film's ambitious visual style, Scorsese divided the story into carefully planned sequences and storyboarded nearly every shot. He envisioned constant movement throughout the film, with the visual style gradually becoming more chaotic as Henry's criminal life spiraled out of control. By the film's conclusion, Scorsese wanted audiences to feel as though everything was spinning apart alongside Henry himself. The movie's energetic style drew inspiration from Jules and Jim, featuring extensive narration, rapid editing, freeze frames, and frequent changes in location. Scorsese believed this disregard for conventional filmmaking perfectly reflected the reckless attitude of the gangsters. He embraced what he described as a punk approach, intentionally using abundant narration and quick cuts to overwhelm viewers with images and information. Every frame was packed with visual detail because Scorsese believed the gangster lifestyle was rich, busy, and constantly evolving. Freeze frames were used at key moments to emphasize important turning points in Henry Hill's life. Joe Pesci never judged Tommy DeVito as a character, although he admitted that filming Spider's murder was emotionally difficult until he forced himself to think the way Tommy would. Lorraine Bracco also found the production emotionally demanding due to the male-dominated cast. She felt she constantly had to prove the importance of her performance to ensure Karen remained a significant presence in the film. Bracco viewed Karen not simply as a gangster's wife, but as a woman trapped in an abusive relationship. According to Joe Pesci, many of the film's most memorable moments came from improvisation during rehearsals. Scorsese encouraged the cast to experiment freely, recording their spontaneous performances and selecting the strongest dialogue to incorporate into revised versions of the screenplay used during principal photography. One of the film's most unforgettable moments is Tommy's famous "Funny how do I amuse you?" exchange with Henry was inspired by a real-life experience involving Joe Pesci. Before becoming an actor, Pesci worked as a waiter and once casually told a mobster that he was funny, intending it as a compliment. Instead, the remark was met with hostility, creating an awkward and tense situation that later became the basis for the iconic scene. The sequence was further developed during rehearsals, where Joe Pesci and Ray Liotta improvised much of the dialogue while director Martin Scorsese recorded several takes. After reviewing 4 or 5 different versions, Scorsese rewrote the dialogue and incorporated the best moments into the final screenplay. Another memorable scene at the dinner at Tommy's mother's house was also largely improvised. Tommy's mother was played by Martin Scorsese's real-life mother, Catherine Scorsese. The only scripted line in the entire sequence was, "Did Tommy tell you about my painting?" The painting of the bearded man surrounded by dogs was created by Nicholas Pileggi's mother and was inspired by a photograph published in the November 1978 issue of National Geographic magazine. Interestingly, the cast did not meet the real Henry Hill until just a few weeks before the film's premiere. Ray Liotta met Hill in a private, undisclosed location. After watching the completed film, Hill told Liotta that he loved the performance and was highly impressed with the movie. The legendary tracking shot through the Copacabana nightclub was born out of necessity. The filmmakers were denied permission to use the club's main entrance, forcing them to enter through the back, rather than treating it as a limitation. Scorsese transformed it into one of cinema's most celebrated long takes, filmed in a single continuous shot. The sequence symbolizes Henry's exciting future and the glamorous criminal lifestyle that seduces both him and Karen. The scene had to be filmed 8 times because comedian Henny Youngman repeatedly forgot his lines. Scorsese has said that the most difficult part of the film to shoot was Henry Hill's final day as a gangster. He wanted audiences to fully experience Henry's growing anxiety, paranoia, and mental instability caused by heavy cocaine and amphetamine use. In an interview with film critic Mark Cousins, Scorsese explained the meaning behind Tommy firing his gun directly at the camera in the film's closing moments. The shot pays tribute to the ending of the 1903 silent classic The Great Train Robbery, where an outlaw fires directly at the audience. According to Scorsese, the story of Goodfellas is essentially the same tale told decades later. The gunfire represents the constant danger that follows a gangster throughout his life. Even after everything is over, Henry can never truly relax because he will always feel that someone is coming after him. The film concludes with Henry expressing regret that he is no longer a wise guy. Scorsese wanted viewers to feel frustrated with Henry rather than sympathize with him. He also hoped audiences would question the justice system that allowed someone like Henry to escape the consequences of his crimes. Scorsese aimed to portray violence as cold, shocking, and emotionally unsettling rather than glamorous, to secure an R rating from the Motion Picture Association of America, MPA. He was required to remove 10 frames of graphic blood from the final cut. At the time of its production, Goodfellas was the most expensive film Martin Scorsese had ever directed. Although its budget remained modest by Hollywood standards, it was also the first time Warner Brothers required him to conduct preview screenings before release. During 2 test screenings in California, audiences reacted strongly to the sequence depicting Henry's final day as a gangster. Scorsese explained that this intense response was exactly what he and editor Thelma Schoonmaker intended. At the first screening, around 40 audience members walked out during the opening 10 minutes. Ironically, one of the most popular scenes among test audiences was Tommy's unforgettable "Funny How Do I Amuse You?" confrontation. Although Goodfellas features almost no traditional orchestral score, music plays a vital role throughout the film. Scorsese carefully selected songs that subtly reflected the emotions, themes, or personalities in each scene. Every song was chosen to match the period in which the scene takes place. Many scenes were filmed with the music already playing on set, allowing the actors and camera movements to naturally synchronize with the soundtrack. For example, Derek and the Dominoes' Layla was played during filming of the montage revealing the bodies of Jimmy's victims hidden in a car, a dumpster, and a meat truck. In several scenes, song lyrics even overlap with dialogue, adding another layer of meaning. While some songs were written directly into the screenplay, others were discovered during the editing process. Goodfellas premiered at the 47th Venice International Film Festival, where Martin Scorsese won the Silver Lion Award for Best Director. The film received its wide North American theatrical release on September 21, 1990. The film has been re-released in several home media editions over the years. It first appeared on DVD in March 1997 as a single double-sided disc that had to be flipped during playback. In 2004, Warner Home Video released a remastered 2-disc special edition featuring improved picture and sound quality along with bonus content, including audio commentaries. In early 2007, the film debuted on Blu-ray with the same special features. To celebrate its 20th anniversary, an expanded Blu-ray edition was released on February 16, 2010. This edition included the 2008 documentary Public Enemies: The Golden Age of the Gangster film. A 25th anniversary edition followed on May 5, 2015, and on December 6, 2016, Goodfellas was finally released on 4K Ultra HD Blu-ray. The anniversary editions also included a collection of classic Looney Tunes and Merry Melodies animated shorts, including I Like Mountain Music, 1933, She Was an Acrobat's Daughter, 1937, Racketeer Rabbit, 1946, and Bugs and Thugs, 1954. At the box office, Goodfellas opened at number 1, earning $6.3 million from 1,070 theaters during its first weekend. In its second weekend, the film grossed $5.9 million from 1,291 theaters, dropping only 8% and finishing behind the new release-specific highs. It eventually earned approximately $46.8 million in the United States. The film received widespread critical acclaim. On Rotten Tomatoes, 94% of 166 critics gave it a positive review, resulting in an average rating of 9.0 out of 10. The site's consensus describes it as hard-hitting and stylish, calling it a gangster classic and arguably the finest achievement of Martin Scorsese's career. Metacritic awarded the film a weighted average score of 92 out of 100 based on reviews from 21 critics, indicating universal acclaim. CinemaScore audiences also responded enthusiastically, giving the film an average grade of A on the scale from A+ to F. Roger Ebert awarded the film a perfect 4 stars in the Chicago Sun-Times, declaring, "No finer film has ever been made about organized crime, not even The Godfather." Gene Siskel of the Chicago Tribune praised every performance, highlighting Joe Pesci's seemingly effortless and natural acting. He called Goodfellas one of the year's finest films. Both Siskel and Ebert ultimately named it the best film of 1990. Writing for the New York Times, Vincent Canby praised the film's outstanding ensemble cast and noted that every role, no matter how small, was perfectly chosen. He also admired Scorsese's dynamic filmmaking techniques, including freeze frames, rapid editing, and elegant tracking shots, emphasizing that none of these stylistic choices ever felt unnecessary. USA Today awarded the film 4 out of 4 stars, calling it both great cinema and an enormously entertaining experience. David Anson of Newsweek wrote that every minute of the film vibrates with outlaw energy, while Rex Reed described it as big, rich, powerful, explosive, and one of Scorsese's greatest achievements. Richard Corliss of Time magazine praised the film as one of the fastest and most exhilarating 2.5-hour experiences in modern cinema. The film was widely recognized as the best movie of 1990. Roger Ebert, Gene Siskel, and Peter Travers all ranked it as their favorite film of the year. In a survey of 80 film critics, 34 selected Goodfellas as the year's best film, while Martin Scorsese was voted Best Director on 45 ballots. Over the years, Goodfellas has continued to receive recognition as one of the greatest films ever made. It ranked 92nd on the American Film Institute's 10th anniversary edition of 100 Years. 100 Movies in 2007. In 2012, the Motion Picture Editors Guild named it the 15th best edited film of all time. That same year, the site Sound Directors poll ranked it the 48th greatest film ever made. In the 2022 edition of the poll, it climbed to 28th place among directors and tied for 63rd in the critics' poll alongside Casablanca and The Third Man. Film critic James Berardinelli ranked it 39th on his list of the 100 greatest films of all time in 2014. That same year, What Culture included Joe Pesci's portrayal of Tommy DeVito among the 10 most convincing movie psychopath performances. In 2015, the BBC ranked Goodfellas 20th on its list of the 100 greatest American films, based on votes from critics around the world. In February 2020, New York Magazine included it among the greatest films that lost the Academy Award for Best Picture. More than 3 decades after its release, Goodfellas remains one of the defining crime films in cinema history, celebrated for its groundbreaking direction, unforgettable performances, innovative editing, and lasting influence on filmmakers around the world. In June 2008, the American Film Institute, AFI, ranked Goodfellas as the second greatest gangster film in its AFI's 10 Top 10 list, which honored the 10 best films across 10 classic American film genres. The rankings were determined after polling more than 1,500 members of the film community. The movie placed just behind The Godfather, cementing its status as one of the greatest gangster films ever made. The film's legacy continued to grow over the years. In 2000, the United States Library of Congress selected Goodfellas for preservation in the National Film Registry, recognizing its cultural, historical, and artistic significance. Renowned film critic Roger Ebert also called it the greatest mob movie ever made and included it among his 10 best films of the 1990s. In December 2002, a Sight Sound poll of UK film critics ranked Goodfellas as the 4th greatest film of the previous 25 years. Time magazine included it in its prestigious all-time 100 movies list, while Channel 4 placed it at number 10 in its 100 Greatest Films poll. The accolades didn't stop there. Empire ranked Goodfellas 6th on its list of the 500 greatest movies of all time, while Total Film named it the greatest film ever made. In 2006, the Writers Guild of America West placed its screenplay at number 41 on its list of the 101 greatest screenplays. Meanwhile, Premiere Magazine ranked Joe Pesci's unforgettable character, Tommy DeVito, at number 96 on its list of the 100 greatest movie characters, describing him as perhaps the single most irredeemable character ever put on film. Empire also recognized Tommy DeVito, placing him at number 59 among the greatest movie characters in cinema history. One of the film's most celebrated achievements is its iconic 2.5-minute tracking shot through the Copacabana nightclub, famously known as the Copa shot. Widely regarded as one of the greatest shots ever filmed, it became a landmark moment in cinema and helped popularize the use of long Steadicam tracking shots. Its influence can be seen in later productions such as Pulp Fiction, Boogie Nights, The Place Beyond the Pines, and even the Buffy the Vampire Slayer episode The Body. A clear tribute to the sequence also appears in the 2025 film Megalopolis, where the President and First Lady walk through service hallways after their final inaugural ball, accompanied by the same song, Then He Kissed Me by the Crystals. Goodfellas also had a profound influence on television. Series creator David Chase has repeatedly credited the film as one of the biggest inspirations behind HBO's The Sopranos. Speaking with filmmaker Peter Bogdanovich, Chase explained that Goodfellas felt both hilarious and brutally realistic. Unlike earlier mob films, which often portrayed organized crime with an almost operatic grandeur, Scorsese focused on the everyday lives of mobsters. Chase particularly admired ordinary moments, such as the scene where the gang visits Tommy's mother's house after committing murder. The casual dinner conversation and his mother's painting create a strange but unforgettable contrast to the violence that surrounds them. Chase admitted that The Sopranos learned a great deal from Goodfellas. The connection between the two productions goes beyond inspiration. A total of 27 actors appeared in both Goodfellas and The Sopranos, including Michael Imperioli, Frank Pellegrino, Tony Sirico, Vincent Pastore, Frank Vincent, and several others, strengthening the shared legacy between the film and the groundbreaking television series. On July 24, 2010, the film celebrated its 20th anniversary with a special private screening at the Museum of the American Gangster in New York City. The event was hosted by the real Henry Hill and attended by a select group of guests. 2 years later, In January 2012, AMC announced plans to develop a television adaptation of Goodfellas, with Nicholas Pileggi collaborating alongside television writer and producer Jorge Zamacona. In 2015, Goodfellas closed the Tribeca Film Festival with a screening of its beautifully restored 25th anniversary edition. 5 years later, AMC began airing the film with a content warning acknowledging that some of its language and cultural stereotypes no longer align with modern standards of inclusion and may offend some viewers. By comparison, The Godfather continues to receive only a standard viewer discretion notice. One of the film's most memorable opening lines immediately establishes its central theme. Henry Hill, portrayed brilliantly by Ray Liotta, declares, "As far back as I can remember, I always wanted to be a gangster." That single sentence sets the stage for a story built on contradiction and self-deception. When Henry says these words, he is already involved in a horrifying situation. Alongside Tommy DeVito, played by Joe Pesci, and Jimmy Conway, played by Robert De Niro, he pulls over to investigate noises coming from the trunk of their car. Inside lies a made man who is somehow still alive. Tommy repeatedly stabs him with a kitchen knife before Jimmy fires several shots to finish the job. Bathed in the red glow of the car's taillights, the scene becomes one of the most unforgettable images in gangster cinema. Later, the trio buries the body. 6 months afterward, they are forced to dig up and relocate the decomposing corpse. Henry becomes violently sick, while his companions joke about the gruesome task. Moments like these raise an obvious question: why does Henry still want to be a gangster? Throughout the film, Henry constantly praises the power, wealth, and freedom that come with being a wise guy. Martin Scorsese immerses viewers in Henry's perspective, using energetic storytelling, rapid editing, and stylish filmmaking to capture the excitement and temptation of that lifestyle. Yet Henry conveniently ignores or suppresses the violence, fear, betrayal, and hypocrisy that define the world he idolizes. When Goodfellas premiered in 1990, many audiences experienced the same fascination. Some critics questioned whether Scorsese was glorifying organized crime, while countless fans decorated their walls with posters of Henry, Jimmy, and Tommy, admiring their fearless attitudes and rebellious image. However, that interpretation misses the film's deeper message. Just as Henry refuses to acknowledge the darker truths about the mafia, many viewers became captivated by the movie's dark humor, relentless pace, and charismatic criminals, mistaking it for a celebration of gangster life. In reality, Martin Scorsese and co-writer Nicholas Pileggi, whose non-fiction book Wise Guy, Life in a Mafia Family served as the basis for the screenplay and never intended to glorify the mafia. Their goal was to draw audiences into Henry's world, allowing them to experience its excitement before revealing its true cost. Scorsese portrays Henry Hill and the mafia as deeply corrupt, hypocritical, and often both terrifying and absurdly funny. He wanted viewers to understand why Henry found that life so appealing, while ultimately exposing it as a stressful, violent, and ultimately empty existence. Considering how many people continue to misinterpret Goodfellas as a glamorous crime fantasy, it's fair to ask whether Scorsese fully achieved his artistic intentions or whether the film's brilliance made its seductive world impossible for some viewers to resist. However, this is a recurring trend in the responses to Scorsese's work, which regularly immerses audiences in a self-contained worlds of toxic masculinity and immoral behavior, and underscores how many moviegoers struggle to engage with and interpret a text. Going back to Mean Streets 1973, following low-level street thugs on a reckless path of self-destruction, Scorsese has consistently implanted as spectators in his characters a subjectivity while never moralizing or offering polemical repudiation of their behavior. In many ways, Mean Streets uses the same narrative and formula techniques as Goodfellas to achieve its effect, including a similar bathing of fat characters in red light, a familiar blend of levity and toxicity, music, and a main character who compartmentalizes his criminality. Though Harvey Keitel's Charlie at least feels Catholic guilt about his crimes. Music. He seeks to atone physically. Holding his finger over flame to feel the pain of hell. Charlie remarks, "The pain in hell has two sides, the kind you can touch with your hand, the kind you can feel in your heart. Your soul, the spiritual side, and the worst of the two is the spiritual." Charlie grapples with the morality of his life. Henry shows no such regret in Goodfellas. Take when Henry seems shocked after Tommy impulsively shoots a spider Michael imperially, but he doesn't object on moral grounds or lose sleep over what happened. Such unquestioning acceptance of this lifestyle has led to a debate about what message Scorsese intends to impart. Scorsese told Stephen Colbert that he sought to depict the glamour of evil with Goodfellas. His artistic goal is to understand the world from within. What often makes Scorsese's pictures initially so divisive is also what makes them venerable works of art. They confront, entertain, and require the audience to read them. Scorsese admitted to critic David Aronstein, "I want to provoke the audience. Like in Goodfellas. What these people do is morally wrong." The film doesn't say that. Scorsese's commitment to provocation often comes into question, inciting a brand of aesthetic discourse that goes back to Plato's arguments in the Republic about art being mere imitations that cannot grasp the truth and only represent the face value. Of course, aesthetic theorists have countered Plato, placing the role of interpretation on the viewer more than most filmmakers. Scorsese's pictures require much from his audience, sometimes to the film's detriment. For instance, Scorsese's complete absorption into the mind of Travis Bickle is what made Taxi Driver 1976 compelling, and the film's message remains a regular topic of debate along with its portrait of a racist main character and its effect on its audience. Just ask John Hinckley Jr., whose obsession with the film and star Jodie Foster led to an assassination attempt on Ronald Reagan in 1981. More recently, Scorsese's look at duplicitus, hard-partying brokers in The Wolf of Wall Street 2013 tested the limits of many viewers. Read Esther Zuckerman's article in The Atlantic. The Wolf of Wall Street is a douchebag's handbook who could not interpret for themselves that the filmmaker did not sanction the debauchery, hedonism, and duplicity shown in the film. Scorsese resists wagging his finger at the characters or openly decrying their behavior. He respects his audience too much to resort to moralizing and assuming they can interpret his message without his having to spell it out. And while each reviewer or spectator is entitled to their interpretation, some might do better to attempt to understand what Scorsese was going for. Indeed, music. Even though Scorsese tells stories about criminal behavior, his initial interest in these characters stems from how they rationalize their lives. He shows the characters such as Henry Hill and deadly organizations, compartmentalizing their sanctimoniousness and criminality in favor of the personal benefits their worlds supply. In Mean Streets, a faith-based exchange occurs in which Keitel's Charlie hopes his physical self-punishment will be enough to atone for his street crimes. However, the thought of leading a moral life to end his internal conflict never occurs to him. The examples throughout Scorsese's career persist into The Irishman 2019 and Killers of the Flower Moon 2023. The former features a passive Darrow as a mob hitman who never questions why he kills because, like in World War II, his need to follow orders and do the prescribed thing negates any sense of his internal morality, which emerges tragically late. In the latter film, A compartmentalization allows Leonardo DiCaprio's dollar to go along with a plot to murder the OH people for their oil money despite loving his wife, an OH woman whose family he has preyed upon. However, frequently these themes appear in Scorsese's filmography. Thea had not been present in his work for some time before Goodfellas. When the discussions about adapting Palgi's book began in the mid-1980s, Scorsese's career floundered in a decade of commercial gambles and creative transition. While spending much of the 1980s attempting to get The Last Temptation of Christ 1988 made, he explored other genres. He took director-for-hire jobs that gave him the freedom to experiment, resulting in some of his most inventive work on The King of Comedy 1982 and After Hours 1985, while elsewhere he earned commercial success with A Lot of Money 1986. Still, he was uniquely suited to the subject matter of Wise Guy, having witnessed the gangster lifestyle in his youth. His Italian-American upbringing in New York's Little Italy neighborhood featured gangsters as part of the natural environment. Even his best friend during childhood was a mobster's son. Better than any other filmmaker, Scorsese could understand how someone could be drawn into the gangster lifestyle, extolling its perks while subjecting themselves to its dangers. Still, after Mean Streets and Raging Bull 1980, Scorsese had wanted to move on from mobsters. Yet, he couldn't help but appreciate Palgi's honest and romance-free depiction of that world. Paley started out as a journalist covering crime for the Associated Press in 1956 and became New York Magazine's resident crime expert in 1968. A native of Brooklyn's Bensonhurst neighborhood, Fly grew up around Italian-American gangsters and earned a reputation among them as a respectably neighborhood guy. So, he knew that world well. His book Wise Guy would mark the first time a mobster told all without coercion or government pressure. The real Henry Hill defied his contacts at the FBI and the U.S. Marshals overseeing his placement in the Witness Security Program, WISC, by giving Palgi his number through an attorney. But Scorsese wouldn't be the first filmmaker to tackle Hill's story despite reading the book in 1986 and immediately wanting to buy the rights to adapt it. Around that time, Palgi had been dating Nora Fine. Music, and they would eventually marry in 1987. Efron's fascination with mobsters extends from her screenplay for Susanna Seidelman's mob comedy Cookie, 1989, to her many references to The Godfather, a 1972, in her romantic comedy You Go to Mail, 1998. Efron also wrote the mob comedy My Blue Heaven 1990, which opened a month before Goodfellas and follows Henry Hill like gangster Vincent D'Elia played by Steve Martin, whose time as a schnook in witness protection finds him pining for Argyle and building a baseball park in his new San Diego suburb home. After securing the screen rights to Wise Guy, Scorsese would have finished making The Last Temptation of Christ before moving on to what would eventually become Goodfellas. The title had to be changed due to a mob theme at a television show called Wise Guy, which debuted in 1987 and ran until 1990. The film's production landed at Warner Brothers. Music, an appropriate home given the studio's reputation for gangster movies during the golden age of Hollywood. Classics such as The Public Enemy, 1931, Little Caesar, 1931, Angels with Dirty Faces. Music, 1938, and The Roaring Twenties, 1939 adopted a ripped from the headline as approach to prohibition or gangsterism. Scorsese would deploy a similar style to Goodfellas, drawing from TV tabloid journalism and documentary aesthetics to consider the anthropology of low-level soldiers in the Italian-American mob. The production's striking verisimilitude became one of its most enduring hallmarks, accented by the involvement of Hill and many other actual gangsters. Casting director Ellen Lewis even found roles for several real-life mobsters. adding to the film's warm reception in their circles. In GQ's Oral History to celebrate the film's 20th anniversary, APGI remarks, "Mob guys love it because it's the real thing and they knew the people in it. They say it's like a homie movie. However, it's far from a quasi-documentary as scholar Fulvio Orsito claims. Goodfellas tells the story of Henry Hill, starting with his modest Brooklyn childhood in the 1950s and his admiration for the freedom and power of the Cicero family gangsters in his neighborhood headed by Paul Sorvino. After landing a job with FEMA as a gopher, he enters their ranks as a teenage petty criminal. Getting accepted into their fold means Henry will be somebody in a neighborhood full of nobodies, he observes in his narration, which sounds like witness testimony upon a reflection of the film's courtroom finish. Indeed, Henry recalls his role in the organization over the next 2.5 decades, from joining Jimmy and Tommy on heists and shakedowns to starting up a cocaine side hustle. Meanwhile, he marries a Jewish woman from the neighborhood, Lorraine Bracco, and has 2 kids, which never prevents him from carrying on with a girlfriend, Janice, Gina Mastroco, or his eventual drug cutter, Sandy Mezza. Although Henry will never be a full member of the Italian crew due to his Irish blood, Tommy can still be made. It's a big moment for Henry and Jimmy when that's set to happen. But the bosses whack Tommy instead to pay back for the unauthorized killing of a made man, Billy Batts. Frank Vincent, music the guy from the trunk, despite robberies and assaults on his list of crimes. Cocaine, which Paulie warns him not to mess with, eventually brings Henry down. His capture prompts him to turn over his so-called family members and disappear into what's to some anonymous suburban purgatory. The events in Goodfellas are less important than the flavor of realism and personal reflection with which Scorsese presents them. Certainly, its iconic scenes have been fixed in the lexicon of great movie moments, inspiring countless homages. Even people who have never seen the film know the "How Am I Funny" scene spoofed most memorably in the Goodfellas segments on TV's Animaniacs 1993 to 1998, featuring a Pesci-esque pigeon with a temper. However, the events in Henry's life prove secondary to the general portraiture of his world. Consider how much time Henry spends discussing the planning and aftermath of the famous Lufthansa heist, which has been the subject of several books and movies. Yet Henry was not there, and in keeping with the film's structure as a cinematic rendering of Henry's and to a lesser degree Karen's recollections, Scorsese does not show what occurred at the airline. The film serves as a statement of the facts as Henry and Karen see them given either as witness testimony, music personal accounts or true confessions to the viewer. In keeping with the non-fiction source material, Scorsese is committed to realism in Goodfellas. Production designer Christia oversaw the obsessive attention to every detail insisted on by Scorsese and the actors. The Italian fabrics imported for the costumes, the Foxy commercial for Morris Chuckle to buy a business modeled after the real thing, the vintage watches in the actors' pockets which never see screen time, the real rolled up wad of cash De Niro kept on him during the shoot. And yet the production's attention to journalistic detail throughout Goodfellas serves as Scorsese's ambition to deconstruct a gangster cinema using what scholarly Menace identifies as irony, direct address and juxtapositions between the voiceover narration and the visual content of the film to recast the genre in a new light. Scorsese's style creates a critical distance that reminds the viewer they're watching a movie while simultaneously immersing them in Henry's world. This is the real magic trick of Goodfellas. Like Scorsese's earlier work, especially Mean Streets, the director employs visual and oral techniques derived from French New Wave directors such as François Truffaut and Jean-Luc Godard. When Scorsese and Paley first started to prepare their script, The director showed him true footage E.T. Jim 1962 to demonstrate what he wanted regarding voice-over and still images. What I loved about these truffaut and guttered techniques from the earliest 60s was that the narrative was not that important, Scorsese remarked. The narrative flow could pause for a freeze-frame or an aside, interrupting the story proper to make a tangential point. Tabloid television programs such as Hard a Copy and A Current Affair use comparably devices that by association add to the film's expository quality. Similarly, the voice-over might come from multiple sources, such as when Karen remarks about Henry's rude behavior on their first date or meeting too many Pauls, A. Peters, and Marys at their wedding reception, along with a fourth wall breaking a finale. The film's variety of technique creates an almost brown effect that underscores the cinematic medium. Scorsese's use of new wave methods enlivened Henry's account of his gangster lifestyle, but it also underlines incongruities between what Henry tells USA and what the film shows us. Note how Henry lumps everyone else into the category of suckers. To us, those good people who worked shitty jobs for bum paychecks and took the subway to work every day and worried about their bills were dead. By contrast, anything you wanted was a phone call away. But Henry and the other gangsters live in tacky houses, their wives wear cheap clothes and bad makeup, according to Karen, and they put their lives at risk to maintain this unimpressive facade and acquire the little extras for their families. Our husbands weren't brain surgeons, Karen admits, they were blue-collar guys. The only way they could make extra money, a real extra money, was to go out and cut a few corners. But anyone living too extravagantly risks attracting unwanted attention. And if the authorities don't get them first, someone else on the crew will whack them for conspicuous spending. Several members of Jimmy's crew meet this fate after the Luanza heist when he attempts to shield himself from suspicion by eliminating anyone else involved. Yet being part of a crew is supposed to mean that nobody can, A, around with you. According to Henry, it also means that you could, A, around with anybody just as long as they weren't also a member. This is proven false as well. Case in point, Billy Batts. Meanwhile, Henry faces discrimination in his Italian-American gangster family social order. His highest possible role as a mob soldier is determined by his half-Irish ethnicity, which plays a central role in the Cicero family power structure, where only pure-blooded Sicilians can become made men. This fact emphasizes how Henry will forever be a pilot fish in the mob, swimming behind the bigger sharks, picking up scraps. Jimmy and Tommy, the latter being full Italian, have more cred within the family than Henry does, though Jimmy too is part Irish. Henry's status as a relative outsider, however, allows him to observe from a distance and report, which makes his film-long testimony so authentic, and the real Henry such a good subject, according to Paley. Ethnicity also reveals another dimension into the deplorable behavior in Goodfellas, whose characters have all manner of nasty things to say about anyone who's not a straight male of Italiana blood, especially people of color. These is nothing new in Scorsese cinema. Mean Streets features Cato's character pining after a black dancer has a socially forbidden desire. There's a Travis Pickle targets black people with a violence and Taxi Driver and his Jake LaMotta in Raging Bull transfers his many frustrations onto his black nemesis Sugar Ray Robinson. The wise guys in a Goodfellas reinforce their group identity by treating blackness as subhuman. Music. With Tommy questioning his girlfriend when she praises Sammy Davis Jr. saying, "I could see how a white girl could fall for him." Tommy responds in his typical manner by making a scene asking, "So, you can deny that stuff?" The examples of psycho behavior have inspired analyses of racism in the film, but suffice it to say, it's another aspect of Henry's world that remains appalling. Yet, he accepts it. Being a gangster isn't a license to do anything, despite Henry's claim. Instead, it's better described as an alternative lifestyle that operates in ways that create the illusion of control. When the system fails, gangsterism provides protection for people who can't go to the cops. Henry argues. It supplies a feeling of defiance against traditional lifestyles for people who might not cut it in the real world, and so, they undercut, steal, intimidate, music, and murder to get their way, creating a world on their terms. Henry proudly affirms, "I was a part of something. I belonged." And while Henry remains uncritical of the world and its morality, Karen is more aware of her conflicted feelings about her husband's gangster lifestyle, showing more evidence of cognitive dissonance than her husband. "I know there are women, like my best friends, who would have gotten out of there the minute their boyfriend gave them a goon to hide, but I didn't. I got to admit the truth. It turned me on. Even so, there are rules to this world, as in the conventional law-abiding world, and the punishments prove even more severe. Get out of line, and you might get whacked. Are the risks worth the rewards?" For Henry, it seems so. Still, music. In his book about the film Made Men, The Story of Goodfellas, critic Glenn Kenya observes, "It never occurs to Henry that he may have traded a leash for a noose. But there was never a trade for Henry. He entered this life as a kid with his parents providing his only exposure to a normal lifestyle. Henry has never worked a straight day in his life, so there's hardly a comparison or moral framework for Henry to judge his life against. When he's eventually caught on giving a testimony from the courtroom in the final scene, he does not regret his actions. He can only mourn the loss of his freedoms. I'm an average nobody. I get to live the rest of my life like a schnook." Even though Henry's world contains contradictions, prejudice, and a danger that arguably negate its freedom, Scorsese's whirlwind aesthetic captures its addictive high, where distortion, hyperbole, and exuberance all coming. Also Pauline Kael notes in her New Yorker review, Kael argued the film is a Millie fantasy, claiming it's about being a guy and guys getting high on being a guy. To be sure, the visual bravado Scorsese brings to this picture captivated many viewers while conveying Henry's enthusiasm for mob life. From the famous one-shot Deadcam sequence through the Copacabana to the many rompish episodes where crime pays off, the sheer virtuosity with which every scene arrives and folds into the next make us the 149-minute runtime feel about half of that. It's a testament to Scorsese's long-time collaboration with editor Thelma Schoonmaker, whose rhythms, pauses, and interruptions move in harmony with the nimble brow of Michael Ballhaus's superb cinematography. And then Scorsese, serving as his own music supervisor, layers each scene with a music that adds another energetic dimension. The director had worked out what songs he wanted in the film during the scripting phase, noting soundtrack choices in the initial screenplay from Cream's guitar rip on Sunshine of Your Love to accent Jimmy's deadly presence to Donovan's Atlantis to underscore the mythical sinking of Henry, Tommy, and Jimmy as they attack Bats for insulting Tommy and telling him, "Now go home and get your A_A shine box." Getting swept up in this perfect visual and oral storm is effortless. Even though it's a collapse of frenzy 10-minute sequence set on May 11, 1980, involving a goona deal, a cocaine drop, some delicious-looking meat sauce, and justified paranoia about a helicopter looks nightmarish. Scorsese captures the essence of how being a gangster makes you feel alive, and in Henry's case, cocaine heightens that even further. Henry's excitement throughout the film is laden with humor and crackles with the electricity of improvisations by the actors, especially Pesci, who manages to conjure laughter out of the most unlikely situations. The film's gallows humor can be infectious, though it's often contained within disturbing scenes, such as Thea musing late-night dinner with Tommy's mother. Catherine Scorsese, Thea director's mother, a delightful presence intent on feeding her hungry guys and showing off her painting while Batsa barely clings to the life in the carrot trunk just outside. Goodfellas constantly puts the viewer into situations that on the surface should be horrific, yet they prove entertaining and funny. They play on the razor's edge between exhilarating and scary, with Thea How Am I funny scene serving as a syncodoc for the film's effect dangerous and elated, which is to say that's how Henry sees his wise guy lifestyle. It's a constant influx of heightened stimulation from violence, power, sex, and drugs. And accented by Scorsese with rock and roll. When Goodfellas debuted in 1990, it arrived nearly 2 decades after Francis Ford Coppola's The Godfather, which inspired a strain of imitators and similarly staged epics, including Sergio Leone's Once Upon a Time in America, 1984, and David Mamet's Things Change, 1988. They treat the Italian mob as operatic and sometimes romanticize feral behaviors with music from the old country and a general regality. The Sammy, a brand of self-satisfaction that permeates Frank Sinatra's music. By contrast, Scorsese's film questions everything with its grimy realism and none of the myth-making found in Coppola's film, which many forget presents a damning critique of American capitalism, since Scorsese's film is not a grand dramedy, but a personal testimony. He punctuates Goodfellas with a startling shot of Tommy dressed in an outfit he wore earlier when robbing a truck, facing the camera, and shooting a pistol at the audience in homage to the 1904 Western short The Great Train Robbery, in which an outlaw is the same. The final shot shows Henry returning to his wit's home after receiving the paper, dressed in an unflattering light blue robe. On the soundtrack, the Sex Pistols cover of Sinatra's My Way blares in a self-destructive rebellion, echoing the volatility of the band's frontman, Sid Vicious, who died at 21 after a brief but frenzied life of drugs, violence, and attitude. Henry is just unapologetic about his choices. The lyrics regrets I've had a few / but and then again too few to mention / you did what I had to do / I saw it through without exemption couldn't be more appropriate, nor could the song choice be a parallel to Goodfellas' punkish status in the gangster genre at that time. Today the film's legacy cannot be overstated. It's regularly hailed as the director's best work, and many publications and list makers have ranked it the greatest mobile movie ever made. Scorsese has returned to the organized crime well a few times since, with 1995's Casino sharing the most in common with Goodfellas. Scorsese redeemed with the to tell the story planned for the author's book A Casino Love and Honor in Las Vegas. The two once again collaborated on the script, which was completed before the book's publication, while Niro, Pesci and others from Goodfellas signed on to a star. Many of them would return for The Irishman, but the film's reach extends to prestige television as well. David Chase, creator of HBO's The Sopranos, often considered the best television series ever made, admits he couldn't have conceived his show without Goodfellas. During its run 1999 to 2007, The Sopranos became the benchmark for a scripted television series in the 21st century, launching a slew of imitators, each about a complex white man who oversees a criminal organization, which is both appealing and morally corrupt. By extension, without Goodfellas, television shows such as Deadwood, Breaking Bad, Better Call Saul, Ozark, Boardwalk Empire, Peaky Blinders, Lilyhammer, Sons of Anarchy, Brotherhood, Gomorrah, and many others would probably not exist. More than any of its consequence, Goodfellas captures the pulse of gangster life. not just to understand what motivates these people and how they compartmentalize their choices, but to supply the audience with a shock treatment, a diversion, a persistent mode of seduction and a repulsion. Scorsese balances Henry's testimony with the reality of his downfall. Henry may romanticize a gangsterism, but the film does not, and while Scorsese uses a dichotomy of visual techniques from splashing the characters in hellish shreds or employing French New Wave devices, the film is not an expressive tragedy in the Greek tradition. Henry's downfall isn't so much tragic as it is earned. In her pen, A.K.L. rightly observed that Goodfellas has no arc and doesn't climax, it just comes to a stop. True enough, but that's not a flaw. It's an intentional strategy to confront the viewer. Henry had a slice of what he considers the good of life. He did things his way and he lost it. Music. Having acted with impunity from the law and having betrayed the rules of his wise guy family, Scorsese tells a familiar gangster story going back to the crime adolescence the characters played by James Cagney and Edward G. Robinson learned in 1930s gangster pictures, but Scorsese revived the genre with vibrant stylization and an entrenched perspective that seduces and in doing so entraps the audience as a provocateur might. Whether segments of the audience fall into the lure of Henry's world or as intended recoil from it, Goodfellas continues to exert its influence on anyone who encounters it. For as long as I've known, I wanted to study movies and understand what makes a certain one so great, and Goodfellas is one of those movies, one that carries a legendary status with it that can make someone like me slightly intimidated to look and review it. It's a very full movie with great characters and a masterful direction that is definitely worth seeing multiple times. So you can catch everything, but it does hinder the first viewing with how full the movie is. Besides that, Goodfellas still stands as not only one of the best gangster movies of all time, but as an all-time classic period. Believe it or not, the story of Goodfellas is based off of true events. Music, with slight variations on the source material. But apparently the movie holds very true to the original story as said by the real Henry Hill. It focuses on the rise of three generations of mafia family. But mainly the rise of Henry Hill as he learns what it takes to become a gangster. His upcoming from the beginning is really interesting, and watching the life of crime consume him is even more so. His associates in Tommy Two Gun DeVito and Jimmy Conway are also interesting characters on their own, and it's the interactions between the three characters and how they work together that really makes you cheer and dislike them at the same time. There are points in the story where Henry gets to reflect on his upbringing as he tries to keep his image and realizes the power of reputation, and the one that sticks out to me is the scene where the kid gets shot in the foot by Tommy, but I guarantee there's some more that I missed. Speaking of things that I missed, the story is pretty packed and rewards multiple viewings. But I do feel it hurts the first time viewing experience of the movie. Keeping a track of all the characters and all their motives can defiantly take a beat to sort out, but is worth it. The performances are outstanding with not a single weak performance among them. Ray Liotta plays the titular Henry Hill and he absolutely kills it. When an actor becomes the character and you no longer see that person as the actor, it's special and immerses you into the movie. His smooth personality can flip to pure anger and violence in an instant, whether he's with Karen Hill played by Lorraine Bracco or with his fellow gangsters, and he brings an intensity that almost makes his appearance of the smooth man seem like an act, and it shows in the scenes when he's angry at his wife. Speaking of the fellow gangsters, Joe Pesci gives one of his most iconic performances in the character of Tommy Two Guns DeVito, which won him an Oscar for Best Supporting Actor in 1990. He plays the unhinged nature of Tommy to at perfection, and it shows in his famous scene where he asks, "How am I funny?" So they go from laughing to extremely tense, And in the scene when he meets his old boss Jimmy Conway, played by Robert De Niro as the coolest of the gangsters, really shows his experiencing of the three generations, as unlike the other two he always has calm nature about him even when slightly paranoid. Lorraine Bracco does a fine job with the thankless job of wife Karen Hill, and she has a couple really good scenes. But I feel she's crying most of the time, and I wish I saw a bit more from her character. But that's a writing thing. The direction by Martin Scorsese absolutely masterful, as it drips with a character and nuance that is benefited by multiple viewings to truly appreciate the work put into the movie. The way Scorsese uses music and voice over is great, even right at the beginning when Henry closes the trunk of the car and the jazz line starts, giving you a classy flair when he says, "For as long as I could remember, I wanted to be a gangster." The infamous long tracking of that follows Henry on a single take makes sense for the story, with the only in mind as Henry takes Karen to dinner and the camera never cuts as he introduces her to people and greets others, showing his control of a situation that might seem a little chaotic to Karen. That's not the only time he uses visual storytelling, as he does it with lighting and with certain thing in frame. A great example is when Karen meets with Jimmy and is trying to get her to go into one of the stores. The camera goes to wide and we can see signs pointing towards the store saying one way and other things. There are so many things to unpack in this. I guarantee I missed some. Goodfellas is an iconic gangster film with an extremely well-realized group of characters, music, an excellent story dealing with the consumption of power and crime, outstanding performances, and a masterful vision from legendary director Martin Scorsese. The attention to detail is excellent, made all the more interesting by the fact that it's based on true events with slight variations. Of course, it can be a little overwhelming on the first viewing, but will 100% benefit in our rewatches to understand and catch just how much of a masterpiece this movie is. You can now keep up with movie reviews on Instagram by following Popcorn Business, participate in polls, website and future reviews, and more. It's easy to remember the films that sparked your own love of film at one point of your life or another. And during my early teens, one of those films was none other than Martin Scorsese's Goodfellas. Also an impressionable teenager who also pushing myself to watch more films in general. I remember first watching Thesa on a television broadcast, and I've been watching it again and again every chance I had, whether it be on subsequent reruns or at my own home, to that point where every beat had been rooted so deeply in my head. And although it might not be my favorite Martin Scorsese film, it still encapsulates everything that I find to be what makes his work so only wonderful. Telling the story of Henry Hill, Ray Liotta, and his life within the mafia, Goodfellas starts on the most fitting note with Hill driving together with Jimmy the Gent Conway, Roberta De Niro, and the volatile Tommy DeVito. Joe Pesci, stopping by the side of the road, killing someone who has been stuffed into the trunk of their car. This is where Henry soon narrates, so far back as I can remember, I always wanted to be a gangster, detailing decades into his life with his budding interest in joining the local mafia as a child to his climbing through the ranks as an adult. Goodfellas is a film that seduces one into this world, indulges into the feeling of taking part in a life of crime before you witness everything spiraling out of control. It all seems to start so promisingly when you first hear Henry Hill narrating his life about what it felt like to be a mobster. It pulls you into the criminal lifestyle, for it's a world that Martin Scorsese shows that he knows in and out, and it succeeds in making you feel everything that one would imagine from the glamorized life of being within the mafia. It feels great, it feels so wonderful, but also wrecks you with guilt that follows you after the scope of the damage that has been done continues to hit you. It's a film that feels so horrifying in that same sense. Ida presents itself as highly delightful for one's own sensibilities to take in because it simply felt good for Henry Hill to find people whom he felt he had belonged with. Scorsese makes you feel like you're part of a family the more you spend time with Henry Hill and his associates as characters come into the story at a casual pace, an area continually weaved throughout the film, at times funny, at times frightening. Goodfellas never lets up with encapsulating what it felt like to be a part of the mafia. Even the slightest interactions between every character feel almost like you're invited to become a part of their conversations, too. But it also shows how much research have Scorsese and Nicholas Pileggi put into creating an accurate portrait of what it felt like to be a part of that lifestyle, too. It soon comes down to the film bringing forth a subjective point of view through the narration of Henry Hill, clearly resentful of where he's come from, but from what he affirms of what his life in the mafia had done to him on the whole, you still feel he has only lived a life of emptiness through and through. None of that glamour ever was anywhere near as true as it felt. Henry Hill's narration is the sole narration that carries the story forward. But his wife Lorraine Bracco still plays an integral part in capturing that subjective perspective of the glamour within the mafia lifestyle. At first, she is shown to be resentful of the way in which Henry lives, but comes to be seduced into his own charms. Her perspective is never overshadowed by those of the mean that surround her. But it's also only an important part in emphasizing what Ida felt like to be around these people will have always carried clout with them, being able to find a sense of meaning wherever they went, as Scorsese shows his audiences. Karen is clearly in love with the glamour of the criminal lifestyle, but where she finds her place in Henry Hill's story is best summed up by the emptiness that comes forth in music. With betrayals hitting in only after the other, of the many great American gangster movies that have been canonized all throughout film history, Goodfellas captures what it felt like to be within the moment unlike any other. This isn't so much a film all about one way of experiencing the mafia, despite telling a true story. But what makes it so wonderful comes the way in which it brings you into this world and plays around with you, mixing dark humor with perfectly timed tension. Goodfellas still remains every bit as fresh as Ida was the first day I saw it as a teenager. It's without doubt one of Martin Scorsese's most entertaining movies, but also a work of brilliance from start to finish. With every revisit, I always find myself taken aback by how much more I realize I love about it. And in my eyes, it still remains one of the highest points of Martin Scorsese's large body of work. For 2 days after I saw Martin Scorsese's new film, Goodfellas, the mood of the characters lingered within me, refusing to leave. It was a mood of guilt and regret. Of quick, stupid decisions leading to wasted lifetimes. Of loyalty turned into betrayal. Yet at the same time there was an element of furtive nostalgia for bad times that shouldn't be missed but were. Most films, even great ones, evaporate like mist once you've returned to the real world. They leave memories behind but their reality fades fairly quickly. Not this film, which shows America's finest filmmaker at the peak of his form. No finer film has ever been mad about organized crime. Not even The Godfather. Although the two works are not really comparable, Goodfellas, scheduled to open September 21 in Chicago, is a memoir of life in the mafia, narrated in the first person by Henry Hill, Ray Liotta, an Irish Italian kid whose only ambition from his earliest teens was to be a wise guy, a mafioso. There is also narration by Karen, the Jewish girl, Lorraine Bracco, who married him and who discovered that her entire social life was suddenly inside the mafia. Mob wives never went anywhere or talked to anyone who was not part of that world. And eventually, she says, the values of the mafia came to seem like normal values. She was even proud of her husband for not lying around the house all day, or having the energy and a daring to go out and steal for a living. There is a real Henry Hill who disappeared into the anonymity of the federal government's witness protection program and who over a period of 4 years told everything he knew about the mob to the reporter Nicholas Belli, whose Wisey Guy Life in a Mafia Family was a bestseller. The screenplay by Paglia and Scorsese distilled those memoirs into a fiction that sometimes plays like a documentary that contains so much information and feeling about the mafia that finally it creates the semi-claustrophobic feeling wife talks about the feeling that the mob world is the real world. Scorsese is the writer-director. The only director for the material. He knows it inside out. The great formative experience of his life. He was growing up in New York's Little Italy as an outsider who observed everything, an asthmatic kid who couldn't play sports, whose health was too bad to allow him to lead a normal childhood, who was often overlooked. Uta never missed a thing. There is a passage early in the film in which young Henry Hill looks out the window of his family's apartment and observes with an envy the swagger of the low-level wise guys in the social club across the street, impressed by the fact that Thea got girls, drove hot cars, had money, that the cops never gave them tickets, that even when their loud parties lasted all night, nobody ever called the police. That was the life he wanted to lead. The narrator tells us, the memory may come from Hill and maybe in Phyllis a book, but the memory also is Scorsese, and in the 23 years I have known him, we have never had a conversation that did not touch at some point on that central image in his vision of himself, of the kid in the window, watching the neighborhood gangsters. Like The Godfather, Scorsese's Goodfellas is a long movie with the space and leisure to expand and explore its themes. It isn't about any particular plot. It's about what it felt like to be in the mafia, the good times and the bad times. At first, they were mostly good times, and there is an astonishing camera movement in which the point of view follows Henry and Karen on one of their first dates to the Copacabana nightclub. There are people waiting in line at the door, but Henry takes her in through the service entrance, past the security guards and the off-duty waiters, down a corridor, through the music kitchen, through the service area, and out into the front of the club where a table is literally lifted into the air and placed in front of all the others so that the young couple can be in the first row for the floor show. This is power. Karina doesn't know yet exactly what Henry does. She finds out. The method of the movie is a slow expansion through levels of the mafia with characters introduced casually and some of them not really develop until later in the story. We meet the Don Paul Cicero, Paul Sorvino and Jimmy the Gent Conway, Roberta Darrow, a man who steals for the sheer love of stealing, and Tommy DeVito, Joey Pesci, a likable guy, except that his fierce temper can explode in a second with fatal consequences. We follow them through 30 years, first through years of unchallenged power, then through years of decline, but they have their own kitchen in a prison and boxes of thick steaks and crates of wine and then into betrayal and decay. At some point, the wholly wonderful romance of the mafia goes sour for Henry Hill. And that moment is when he and Jimmy and Tommy have to bury a man whom Tommy kicked almost to death in a fit of pointless rage. First, they have to finish killing him. They stop at Tommy's mother's house to borrow a knife. And she feeds them dinner. Then, they bury him. Then later they have to dig him up again. The worst part is their victim was a main guy, a mafioso who is supposed to be immune. So they are in deep trouble, and this is not how Henry Hill thought it was going to be when he started out on his life's journey. From the first shot of his first feature, Who's That Knocking at My Door? 1967, Scorsese has loved to use popular music as a counterpoint to the dramatic moments in his films. He doesn't simply compile a soundtrack of golden oldies, he finds the precise sound to underline every moment, and in Goodfellas, The popular music helps to explain the transition from the early days when Henry sells stolen cigarettes to guys out of factory gates through to the frenetical later days when he's selling cocaine in a disobedience of Paul Sorvino's orders. Music, and using so much of Ida himself that life has become a paranoid labyrinth, in all of his work, which has included arguably the best film of the 1970s. Taxi Driver, and of the 1980s, A Raging Bull. Scorsese has never done a more compelling job of getting inside someone's head as he does in one of the concluding passages of Goodfellas, in which he follows one day in the life of Henry Hill, as he tries to do a cocaine deal, cook dinner for his family, play out his mistress, and deal with the suspicion that he's being followed. This is the sequence that imprinted me so deeply with the mood of the film. It's not a straightforward narrative passage, and it has little to do with plot. It's about the feeling of walls closing in, and the guilty feeling that the walls are deserved. The counterpoint is a sense of duty, of compulsion. The drug deal must be made, but the kid brother also must be picked up, and the saucier must be stirred. And meanwhile, Henry's life is careening wildly out of control. Actors have a way of doing their best to work, the work that lets us see theme clearly. In a Scorsese film, Robert De Niro emerged as the best actor of his generation in Taxi Driver. Joe Pesci playing De Niro's brother in Raging Bull created a performance of comparable complexity. Both De Niro and Pesci are here in Goodfellas, essentially playing a major and very challenging supporting the roles to Ray Liotta and Lorraine Bracco, who established themselves here as clearly two of our best new movie actors. Liotta was Melanie Griffith's late arriving, a disturbingly dangerous husband in Something Wild, and here he creates the emotional center for a movie that is not about the experience of being a mafioso, but about the feeling. Bracco was the cop's wife from out in the suburbs in Someone to Watch Over Me, a film in which her scenes were so effective that it was with a real sense of loss that we returned to the main story. The sense of their marriage is at the heart of the film, especially in a shot where he clings to her. Exhausted, music they have made their lifetime a commitment, and it was to the wrong life. The critical line of dialogue in A Goodfellas isn't, I don't think the pitch perfect as far back as I can remember. I always wanted to be a gangster. It sure as hell isn't. Funny. How I mean funny like I'm a clown. I am amuse you. One of those scenes that's perfectly fine and well done and has so completely ruined the way people talk about a great movie that I very much wish it didn't exist. The line I have in mind is a bit of a voice-over narration delivered by Karina Ferrer-Eidman Lorraine Bracco after her future husband Henry Hill Ray Liotta has pressed a blood pistol into her hands. I know there are women like my best friends with who would have gotten out of there the minute their boyfriend gave them a gun to hide, but I didn't. I go to admit the truth. It turned me on. It turned me on. That right there is the beating heart and soul of Goodfellas, a gangster movie about gangster movies and about the whole culture of gangster worship that stretches all the way back to Prohibition. It is. I would quite happily go so far to say the best gangster movie. Not the same thing as the best movie whose characters are gangsters, a title I'd reserve for Angels with Dirty Faces or White Heat or The Godfather and its first sequel. The best movie about who gangsters are and how they came to exert such a magnetic pull on American culture. If you take the gangster to be the most cynically emblematic figure of the United States in the 20th century, as I tend to, selfish monsters of greed, willing to do any amount of violence to everybody who's not in their immediate sphere if it gives them a leg up, somehow coding this in a veneer of romanticism about individuality and personal honor that makes it seem admirable. What could be more all-American than that? The Goodfellas is as close as it comes to the great American novel done as a movie. And of course, the great Americana novel would almost have to be a movie. It's music. based relatively honestly as I understand it on the life of Henry Hill Ray Liotta, an Irish Sicilian kid from New York who idolized the local mobsters from the Lies family and at a young age was able to ingratiate himself within the sphere of Paul Cicero in the film where Heza played by Paul Sorvino. Over the next 30-odd years, Hill snuggled into the world of organized crime, making an abbreviated stay in prison and subsequently getting himself involved in a drug dealing. It was this last crimea that finally tripped him up and got him in real trouble with the law. From here, knowing that his life was forfeit within the mob, he turned informer, sending a whole lot of mafiosi to prison and entering witness protection, insofar as somebody who spent the last quarter-century of his life writing books, posing for photographs, and generally pitching himself as a celebrity could be plausibly stated to be keeping the lower profile of a man in witness protection. One of the earliest books in the rise of Hill, the ex-mobster celebrity, was Wise Guy, Life in a Mafia Family, completed in 1986 by journalist Nicholas Blecky. This book caught the eye of Martin Scorsese, who'd watched his hands-off movies about Italian-American criminals, but found the epic story of Hill's rise and stumble so captivating that he worked with Blecky to develop the book and Blecky's unpublished research notes into a movie. Goodfellas was the result. Music, but there's no trace of a crime reporter's non-fiction book to be found in the film's whirlwind of first-person narrative, which mostly attracts Henry's own stream of consciousness recollection of the events of his life, almost entirely in a chronological order, with a few interjections from his wife, and it very definitely needs those moments from Karen's perspective to work as splendidly as it does taken solely from Henry's point of view. And Goodfellas might feel more of a beautiful tragedy in which the glamorous life of Anna, a pan-coming mobster, is lost through the mania of ambition and replaced by the sullen world of a suburban dad. The film pays just enough attention to Karen's side of things that it becomes less about the allure of mob life to some a Brooklyn kid who'd never amount to anything. It is, music instead about the allure of gangsters writ large in U.S. culture. That curious blended desire for more and more bigger and better stuff, clothes and houses and cars and sex with a thrilling awareness of something evil and dark. I frankly think that Karen, not Henry, is the audience's identification point in all of this. He's our tour guide and a chronicler, telling us what's happening in all of the film's episodic fragments and trying to contextualize it all within the past and future. Karen is the one on the outside who sees all of the glitz and power, benefits from it, and knows that it's wrong while simply not caring very much. And that right there is the whole of American pop culture as a relationship to organized crime. Into it, Jimmy Cagney is an abusive thug and the public enemy, but we root for him. The Corleones of The Godfather are savage monsters, but they dress well and have a nice home, and we admire them as the heroes of an operatic slice of costume drama Americana. Tony Montana in Scarface is a raving psychopath with virtually no appealing characteristics, but he's an icon in our boys' dorm rooms across the nation. The key insight of Goodfellas is in recognizing this and making it the thrust of the plot. But unlike all of those films, Goodfellas doesn't do much of anything to glamorize the life it depicts. It's a gangster movie where no matter how charmingly Sorvino or Robert De Niro play them, the gangsters are still coiled up snakes ready to strike. When the violence hits in this movie, as it does routinely, it's never cool violence. It's usually shocking, swift, thuggish, and yes, I'm entirely aware that Goodfellas is wrapped up in the Sammy gangsters are cool fan reception that I'm suggesting it's critiquing. Ultimately, I can't blame a movie for having stupid fans. A hugely important component of this, I am confident, is in the casting of Liotta as Henry Hill. You don't tend to love him as an actor, But he's more than capable of giving a good performance, and there's a way in which that's all Goodfellas asks of him. He is in music, essence the straight mana to the fit world of the mafia, meant to be a bit colorless in comparison to all of the figures surrounding him. Most notably, of course, Joe Pesci's film Outlaw Tommy DeVito. A great performance of a deadly dangerous character that has unfortunately been buried in parody. What Liotta is great at, even in his bad performances in body movies, is suggesting an internal disorder verging on lunacy, but damp it down enough that you can see why other people in the movie don't notice it. The film draws this out to great effect in the climactic May 11, 1980. In which Liotta's face has been washed out by the makeup department to suggest the acid of a weeks-long coke bender. While in all the soundtrack, the actor rattles through the laundry list of activities required of him that day in a sharp, annoyed tone. He is in all ways off-putting and upsetting. And if this is the way that the dreamed of gangster life turns out, who in their right mind would romanticize it? But even before that point, Liotta is never an attractive figure. He always seems like something is close to breaking, and that more than anything else the film does so what allows Goodfellas to put the Liotta to the romance of the great American gangster. Who the hell wants to be Ray Liotta in this movie? Who wants to have him in their life? It's primarily the reason I think that Scorsese's The Wolf of Wall Street, practically a remake of this film * doesn't work for me. Leonardo DiCaprio is alluring in all the ways Liotta is alarming. None of which is to say that Goodfellas is a tedious muck or any such thing. It's an unrelenting piece of filmmaking, the most perfectly controlled of all Scorsese films. Certainly the best piece of editing in the schoolmaker's extraordinary career, if only for the hurtling way she throws together elements in that same May 11, 1980 sequence, letting the unpleasantly fast-cutting a refusal to let scenes reach their appropriate stopping point to give you the same feeling of non-stop activity and exhaustion that Henry feels. If there is such a thing as the great cocaine sequence in cinema, I can't imagine that this isn't it, but it's not just the picture cutting that gives the sequence and the film as a whole. To propulsion, the film uses music extremely well, letting a collection of fast songs from 50s lounge music to 70s classic rock to set the scene, to a comment on the action through the smirking use of lyrics, which I'll be honest feels a little beneath Scorsese at this point in his career, and most importantly to provide that the visual editing and narrative action always seem hypnotized into matching. I'm not terribly fond of the film's famous stick-cam shot into a nightclub through a crowded kitchen. It's showing off rather than contributing much to the mood, character, or plot. But it would be a complete disavow of the power of fast cinema if I didn't acknowledge the why and the shot is paced and segmented by the use of Then He Kissed Me by the Crystals and turned into a rich multisensory event as a result. This is the golden ideal of moralistic films. Explain why a certain lifestyle is enticing and then explain why it is bad. Most movies that are able to do the former are completely helpless to do that latter once you've demonstrated using all the tools of fast cinema that more is exhilarating. A drool high is transcendent reckless sex is fun. It's simply ludicrous to expect that any but the best filmmaker can around the corner to making us feel in our gut that it's just not worth the cost. Well, Scorsese is not the best filmmaker, but a damn good one. And this was at the peak of his abilities. I'd say he had one more unassailable masterpiece in him. 1993's The Age of Innocence. And ever since then has spent most of his career stalled in exceptionally good territory. And as much as he's able to use music and Schoonmaker's driving editing and the dreamily fragmentary script he and Palgi wrote, and Michael Ball's so handsome elegant cinematography, and Adaro's great performance as the boundlessly charismatic and magnetic James Conway, all in concert to strongly depict the allure of the world and power that capture Henry, and through him captures Karen, and through her captures all of us. As much as he can do that, he still makes it seem ugly. He still makes it seem dangerous. He still makes that ending where Henry grouses about living a boring life in the suburbs where he can even get good Italian carry out to feel more like a relief for us, no matter what the character thinks. He and we somehow got out with our lives, and let's for God's sake not go back there. Maybe that's why there hasn't been a great gangster film in the 27 years since Goodfellas came out, only that Vasco the Sopranos comes close, and Ida still ran out of gas long before Ida ended once this film confronted pop culture with the utter lie that is the gangster picture. Where the hell is the genre to go once something has been perfected the way it was perfected here? What else can you say? Simultaneously fascinating and repellent, Goodfellas is Martin Scorsese's colorful but dramatically unsatisfying inside look at a mafia life in 1955–80 New York City. Commercial prospects for the overall release appear relatively modest, and a noisy bloodletting is likely to take place between wearing critical camps. Scorsese's intent here. Music. To show how a life of brutal crime could be compelling to an Irish-Italian kid whose assorted upbringing hasn't prepared him for anything better is undercut by the off-putting opaque characterization of Ray Liotta. Sympathy is not the issue here. Empathy is first half of the film, introing Ray Liotta and viewer to the mafia is wonderful. Scorsese perfectly cast freezes of grotesque hoodlum types are caricatures in the best sense of the word. There's a good sense of exploring a forbidden world with conventional blinders removed. The second half, however, doesn't develop the dramatic conflicts between the character and the that are hinted at earlier. The effect is simply to keep it piling on and intensifying Liotta's horrific and ultimately numbing descent into depravity, working from the non-fiction book Wise Guy by Nicholas Bly, who collaborated with him on the screenplay. Scorsese returns to the subject matter of his 1973 Mean Streets, but from a more distanced, older, wiser, and subtler perspective. Liotta starts as a gopher for the comic neighborhood godfather Paul Sorvino, gradually coming under the tutelage of Robert De Niro, cast as a middle-aged Irish hood of considerably ruthlessness and repute. The often misplaced dramatic thread is the question of whether Liotta will adhere to his mentor's early lesson of never ratting on his fellow mobsters. The character's split ethnic identity never comes clearly into focus, whether as a tragic figure like Al Pacino in The Godfather or as an unabashed psychopath like the title characters in the crazy recent Brit Pickwick. Being somebody in a neighborhood of nobodies in Goodfellas means going along with whatever brutalities are required. This is made clear right from the credit sequence in which Liotta queasily watches Niro and Joe Pesci perform a cold-blooded execution. Scorsese never spares the viewer the heinousness of the murders, regularly punctuating the story. Liotta develops a flashy pretty boy persona that overcomes the inadequately dramatized misgivings of Lorraine Bracco, who plays a Jewish girl drawn into the life of a mafia wife. I got to admit the truth, Ida turned me on. She tells the audience after Liotta viciously beats up some Inia who made a pass at her. Goodfellas seems to be building up to a change of heart by Liotta about what he's becoming and to a violent break with Bracco. But both options are bypassed as the pic shows Liotta emerging from jail in 1974 to become a cocaine dealer with Bracco's enthusiastic help and against the orders of the old-fashioned Sorvino. Sorvino's scruples recall those of Marlon Brando in The Godfather. But since Goodfellas doesn't share The Godfather film's examination of the mafia evolution in reaction to social injustice, The conflict has no weight and Scorsese misguidedly abandons his focus on the mob community to tell the unrewarding story of lone wolf. The film's style in the second half turns into a frenetic, feverish mimicry of the wasted-looking Lotta's caught-up mental state. Niro, who's in the process of fast-sealing his own destruction by eliminating fellow participants in a big heist, goes along with the new economics of crime. And Liotta winds up having to choose in a pinch between freedom and loyalty. One of the film's major flaws is that Niro, with his menacing charm, always seems more interesting than Liotta, but he isn't given enough screen time to explore the relationship via in his top-billed supporting role. All the tech contributions are first-rate. Music, particularly the lancing by Michael Ballhaus and production designated by Christia, who managed to make the film look bright and alluring while still capturing the slimy bad taste of the Thelma Schoonmaker's always a masterful editing is taught in the first half, but the film rambles seriously after that, wearing out its interest at least half an hour before it's over. If someone were to tell me that they thought Goodfellas was Scorsese's best film, I really couldn't argue with them. I might not agree, but it is a completely valid position as Goodfellas is one of the best films of the 1990s and still holds up today. The film I suggest is skillfully made as you remember it being 20 years later. Goodfellas opens in the middle of the story, in the middle of a scene. Even after some minimalist but effective soul-based titles, Ray Liotta, Robert De Niro, and Joe Pesci drive through the dark of the night when strange sounds come from the back of the car. They pull over and open the trunk, revealing a bloody mess of a man. Joe Pesci violently stabs him repeatedly before De Niro opens fire. Liotta chimes in via voice-over, as far back as I can remember. I always wanted it to be a gangster. This scene serves as an introduction to the film, but repeated viewers will recognize it also as one of the most important moments in the characters' lives, defining and shaping everything that ultimately comes to each of them. Scorsese's Goodfellas moves at a quick chaotic pace, jumping from scene to scene, character to character. This gives the movie a gangster slice of life via quality as the film isn't traditionally a plot-based. Goodfellas is rich with color and interesting visuals. Scorsese's trademark use of freeze frame has never been more exciting and well-placed than it is here. There is a heavy use of narration throughout the film, which you generally see as a crutch, but it works well for this picture. It still detaches you a bit from the actual scenes, but also this is a huge story. Voice-over is really the only way to get the level of depth needed to effectively tell the tale. The use of music is excellent within your constant string of pop hits from the current era of the story. The music instantly connects you to the time and the place of the scene you're watching, and it sells the progression of time perfectly. It's like a massive sprawling sound collage and is easily one of my favorite and defining parts of Goodfellas. Paul Thomas Anderson also used a similar technique in Boogie Nights to a great effect. One of the most iconic moments in Goodfellas is the tracking shot following Liotta and Lorraine Bracco into the bar. The pair travel seamlessly from the building's exterior to the back entrance through the kitchen and down tight hallways until they finally arrive at a center stage table. The shot serves as Bracco's introduction and seduction into the gangster world. Just as she is, we are mesmerized and completely under the spell of the life in Boogie Nights. Anderson opens his film with a similarly long tracking shot from the exterior of Morris's bar all the way through, introducing each of the characters in their glamorous lifestyle before finally settling on the seducer boy played by Mark Wahlberg, who wants desperately to be a part of the scene. It is easy to run Anderson's film a parallel as a story of the ups and downs of life in a business. But it's not with its own film to be worthy of merit despite Anderson's obvious love and borrowing from Scorsese. Imitation is the sincerest form of flattery, though, in any film worthy of it is true something special. Goodfellas goes beyond the mob movie stereotypes to deliver compelling entertainment based on a true story. Having seen the film several times, the first hour and a half drag a bit until we get to the drug-fueled 1980s, but that's only due to my familiarity with the material. The day in the life sequence with Liotta going from place to place and trying to keep to his tight schedule amidst a drug-induced haze is still riveting and easily the highlight of the picture. I'm not as enamored with mob movies as I was when I first saw Goodfellas, which accounts for some of my detachment. Regardless, this is one of the best mob movies ever made. It goes toe-to-toe with the heavyweights. And if you haven't seen it, you're truly missing out on one of the best made films of Scorsese's career and of the 1990s. Henry grows up idolizing mobsters in his impoverished neighborhood. Things take music a turn for the worse when he, along with his friends Jimmy and Tommy, decide to make their way up the mob hierarchy. Scorsese has obviously always fixated on two subjects during his career: mobsters and religion. This is his most famous mob movie, one that continues to be endlessly praised. However, I find it to be his worst effort, a film where he showed all of his worst instincts. The status of this movie as some kind of cinematic masterpiece infuriates me. I always strive to pinpoint hypocrisies when I see them, and the treatment of this movie is the most hypocritical of them all. Many would complain today about the racism of Gone with the Wind or so many other classics from many decades ago, but so few would actually go on to pinpoint everything that is morally objectionable about this frustrating movie. My main gripe with the Goodfellas is its glorified depiction of the gangster lifestyle. I found the central narration to be absolutely horrendous and one of the most annoying narrations in the history of cinema. The accent, the delivery, and everything about it annoyed me to no end. Through this narration, the movie posits that this lifestyle is very cool, at least initially. Most of the movie, the beginning in particular, depicts their lifestyle in such a romanticized and glorified manner that made it very uncomfortable to watch. Not only that, but the movie is told from the point of view of these criminals with whom you cannot sympathize in the slightest. Why would I love a movie that is about everything that I detest about humanity? There is not a single relatable, moving, or sophisticated moment in this movie that is all about how mobsters are cool. Of the cast, Joe Pesci was the highlight for me. He deserved his Oscar for playing the funniest character in the movie. That famous scene of his about him being funny was very memorable. Lorraine Bracco is also quite good, in a very thankless role. All actors delivered strong work here, but their characters were very unlikable obviously, so I did not care about their arcs in the slightest. Obviously, Goodfellas is technically strong. This is the only area of the movie that I genuinely appreciated. The editing by the famed filmmaker is top-notch. The cinematography is fantastic and the soundtrack is a banger. The movie incorporated so many hit songs from the 50s and 60s that I really enjoy. So, I've had a blast listening to them. It's just a shame that all of this technical mastery was spent on a terrible script, frustrating dialogue and a morally objectionable approach to storytelling. Pauline Kael's review of Martin Scorsese's Goodfellas highlights the film's energetic and vivid portrayal of the mafia life, comparing it to Raging Bull, but with a more joyful tone. Callie appreciates the film's dynamic and exuberant depiction of mobsters reveling in their power and wealth, capturing Scorsese's passion for the Brooklyn gang. While she acknowledges the movie's triumphant filmmaking and engaging visual style, she critiques the lack of depth in the characters, particularly the three main mobsters played by Ray Liotta, Robert De Niro, and Joe Pesci. Kael finds that the film, though filled with memorable scenes and impressive directorial flair, lacks a strong narrative arc and deeper character development. making it more of a celebration of filmmaking technique than a profound exploration of its subjects. Martin Scorsese's Goodfellas has a lift. It's like Raging Bull except that it's not domineering. It's like Raging Bull made in a jolly festive frame of mind. It's about being a guy and guys getting high on being a guy, the Nicholas Pileggi book, Wise Guy. Which this movie is based on. Thea filed mobsters are mortal runs, and that was the joke of how John Houstoner showed them from the dawn on down in a pricey designer. But Scorsese, a rap artist keeping up the heat, doesn't go in for ironic detachment. He loves the Brooklyn gangly because it's where distortion, hyperbole, and exuberancy all commingle. His mobsters are high not having a wad of cash in their pockets. The movie is about being _a of the walk with banners flying and crowds cheering. Is it a great movie? I don't think so. But it's a triumphant piece of filmmaking journalism presented with the bow of drama. Every frame is active and vivid, and you can feel the director's passionate delight in making these pictures move. When Henry Hill Ray Liotta, the central character, crosses a Long Island street to beat up the mana who tried to put the make on his girl, the dogwood is in bloom. And all through this movie, we're aware of the ultra-greenness of the suburbs that the gangsters live in. These thieves are always negotiating their way through shrubs and hedges, or they're preparing their food, ceremonially, gregariously, stirring vats of sauce, slicing garlic razor thin. We see them in bars and restaurants where they take preferential treatment as their due, and in the tacky interiors of their noisy homes, we see them hijacking, fencing stolen goods, fixing horse races, shaking down the restaurant owners, committing arson, music, preparing cargo thefts at the airport, burying murder victims, and the different aspects of their lives like operatic motifs. What's missing? Well, there are no great voices. The script by Ply and Scorsese isn't really dramatized. Instead, Scorsese raises the volume on the music and the guys work themselves up, get hard, erupt. This isn't the kind of mindless movie that offers up brutality as entertainment with good guys versus bad guys. Scorsese offers up brutal racketeering and says, "This is all there is to these men." Scorsese's Jake LaMotta could do one thing: fight. These guys can do one thing: steal. The book is an account of the life of the actual Henry Hill as he told it to Palgia after he entered the Federal Witness Protection Program. In the movie picks up his story in 1955 with the obliging 11-year-old kid, half Irish half Sicilian, working as an errand boy at the Cabana hangout of the Brooklyn neighborhood, a gang headed by Paul Sorvino. Also the gang's bet, Henry gets the approval he wants and plenty of spending money. By the time he's 14, he's on the payroll of a construction company and knows the ins and outs of the rackets. In the years ahead, crime is a romp for him. He gets a real charge out of pulling scams side by side with his older pals, Jimmy, Robert De Niro, and Tommy, Joe Pesci. And when music. He takes his Jewish girlfriend Karen Lorraine Bracco to flashy expensive places. He hands out a big tips and is greeted as a celebrity. He's 21. Karen, who's no bimbo, she has a sense of her worth, likes the danger that emanates from him. His life has the look of a Puerto Rican day party crossed with a rock concert. She's excited when she sees his gun, the gun he slugged his rival with. In Raging Bull, the young male tries to ram his way through a brick wall. In Goodfellas, the young male finds a welcoming, warm spot, first with Paulie and the gang, and soon with Jimmy and Tommy, and then with his wife Karen and a couple of kids, and a mistress set up in an apartment. It's a little off-key when Henry reacts to Tommy and Jimmy's acts of violence with puzzled revulsion. During a card game, Joe Pesci's Tommy clowning around, Music A shoots a teenager who's slow to serve him a drink. Incidents like this that are terrifically well framed appear to be pointing toward an awakening sensibility in Henry, but nothing comes of them, so they seem perfunctory, a soft toe a conventionality. Niro has a scene where he goes berserk, and that doesn't develop into anything either. The movie's underpinnings could have been linked together. They suggested that the mafia and other organized crime gangs are continually being destroyed from within by raw male lawlessness. Niro's Jimmy brings off the theft of a lifetime. The $6 million leaf ends a heist. Until then, the biggest cash robbery in United States history. But he can't control his troops. They're so undisciplined. Such small-timers at heart that they start spending ostentatiously, and paranoiac Jimmy, who wants to keep all the dough anyway, takes it as a regretful necessity that he has to whack them that has bumped them off. There are at least 10 murders after the successful robbery. Paulie has strict rules against drugs because drugs turn men into informers who destroy the family. The family doesn't have the decency or forethought to support the wives and the children of the men who are sent to prison. So when Henry is sent up, Karina becomes his partner, smuggling him dope that he deals inside. It's like a regular franchise, and he begins snorting a cocaine. The movie is about how swindling makes you feel alive, and that's what cocaine can keep you feeling. By the time Henry is out of prison and is running a dealership from his Long Island home, he's a manic wreck, ready to sell out his mentor, Paulie, in every hood he knows. And he feels justified because his closest pal Jimmy is ready to whack him and his wife too. But Scorsese doesn't weight the incidents dramatically. He leaves the themes and even the storyline very inert in a hurried, music a not very shapely concluding sequence. He ties up some threads and tells us about a few of the characters and final title omitting though a high comic piece of information. Hill was so determinedly crooked. He used the new identity given to him by the Witness Protection Program to start up a new life of thievery and was thrown out of the program. But they know we've learned so little about him. It's startling to read the title telling USA that Henry and Karen separated after 25 years because we realize we don't have any knowledge of what kept them together so long. The picture has scope rather than depth. We see Henry Hill only from the outside, and he has been made to seem slightly cut off from the mob life. He has been turned into a retread of the anxious, dutiful Harvey Keitel character in Mean Streets when he needs to be a rat in the motor of the movie. Goodfellas is like the Howard Hawks Scarface without Scarface. Paul Sorvino's Paulie comes through reluctant to move his bulk. He basks in his power quietly and never calls attention to himself. Though Lorraine Bracco's Karen doesn't get much screen time, she has a bright vitality. She seems more sexual, more full of go than her music husband. She's in love with him even when she pulls a gun on him, and some of the minor players give the movie a frenzied funny texture. Tony Darrow is comically desperate as a restaurant owner who's so exhausted by the mob's harassment that he pleads with Paulie to accept a partnership in the business. Welker White brings a nip of assertiveness to her scenes as a waspy drug courier who has to have her lucky hat to make a coke delivery. And all the mobsters and hangers on and their womena seem to belong to their settings. It's just the three major hoods played by Liotta, Darrow and Pesci who don't have a strong enough presence. Scorsese had a great critical success with Raging Bull in 1980, selected by international polls of critics as the best film of the 80s. The picture in which he presented his central character as an icon of brutishness. This time he wants the central characters to be realistically shallow, but what flattens the movie isn't that they're shallow sociopaths. It's that these sociopaths are conceived shallowly the way they used to be in B-picture pictures. It wasn't just the low budgets that were evoked by the term B-picture. It was also the unmemorable characters. When Henry Hill is a child, He lives across the street from the Mafia Cabo stand and observes the sporty life of racketeers as they get in and out of Alamos. He wants to make it big like he them. The life he watches is like the images on movie screens that Scorsese and the rest of us watched. But were he not invited to identify with his belongings? An actor can play a shallow hood and still be memorable if were he drawn in to understand the hood's motives and emotions. Bogart used to take us pretty deeply into hoods. These actors seem too old for theory parts, too settled in. They get to USA only in isolated scary scenes. Pesci's a Tommy demanding, "What do you mean?" but funny. Niro's Jimmy wearing an unnatural smile as he waves Karen into what might be a death trap. Yet the movie making has such previewer that you respond as if you were at a live performance. It's Scorsese's performance. He came of age as a director in the early 70s at a time when many film enthusiasts were caught up in the 60s idea that a good movie is always about its director. There's a streak of metaphoric truth in this, but here Scorsese puts the idea right up front. The filmmaking process becomes the subject of the movie. All you want to talk about is the glorious whizzing of camera, the freeze frames and jump cuts. That may be why young film enthusiasts are so turned on by Scorsese's work. They don't just respond to his films, they want to be him. When Orson Welles made Touch of Evil, the filmmaking process just about took over the movie. It was one flourish after another. But that was 1958, and making a thriller about your own wallowing love of the film medium was a thrilling stunt. And Welles didn't drain the characters, rather, he made them more baroque to match his flourishes. He filled the screen with the stars. In 1990, when a movie spans 38 years and runs to epic length, we might miss what big characters can do. Wadanicknilai slightly onlighted for Scorsese's life lessons and New York stories, drawing everything together. Scorsese, the arousal junkie, makes you feel you'd like to hang out with him and listen to him tell how he brought off the effects. He's a master. But the picture doesn't have the juice and the richness that come with major performances. It has no arc and doesn't climax. It just comes to a stop, conceivably. The abruptness could work, but I don't think it does. Will the lift of the movie making still carry some people aloft? Maybe. Because watching the movie is like getting strung out on pure sensation. That's Scorsese's idea of a hood's life. It's also a young film enthusiast's dream of a director's life. And in Scorsese's case, it's not too far from the truth. Goodfellas begins with an often quoted and hugely recognized opening line, and then continues to impress throughout with a movie full of great moments, brilliant dialogue, and a story that doesn't let you go until the movie's final moments. It's a testament to Martin Scorsese that he creates a gangster movie that feels so real, so authentic, and actually draws you in, creating a world that is appealing, and in some parts looks fun and exciting. It's the perfect blend of great dialogue, amazingly realized scenes, and the casting of the central three, all of which bring their best to the movie. Ray Liotta obviously has the most to do, playing the film's narrator, Henry Hill. This movie is probably his best, showcasing his talents as the white-eyed rookie in the gangster underworld, slowly being transformed into one of the Goodfellas, corrupted by the money, the glamour, and other addictions along the way. It's a perfect acting performance. It is outdone by Joe Pesci, though again in his best performance. The unhinged, often terrifying Tommy DeVito is Joe Pesci at his best. Calm, quirky, and charming in one moment and then angry, loud, and abrasive in another. It's Joe Pesci that gives the movie its edge and most of its famous scenes, lines, and moments, none more so than the infamous funny scene. Goodfellas is also unusual in that it offers a very subdued, quite reserved performance from Robert De Niro. It is what the film requires, but in a movie about gangsters, He is the only that is the calmer, more level-headed, at least for most of the movie. It's still a great performance, and the film is great because the chemistry between the three is fantastic. The story itself is a classic rise and fall of a gangster, but because it builds the characters so well, it feels like a fresh approach to a well-known story. There is very little completely new here, but it's delivered in a sharp, quick, and often funny way, making the more dramatic, violent moments so much more graphic and jarring. What Scorsese delivers is arguably his best gangster movie amongst so many other classics. Casino is great, but these characters are more well-rounded and developed. Music. The Departed is fantastic. Goodfellas tells a truer, more realistic gangster story. It's also that underpinning element of truth that makes a Goodfellas so much more interesting. The idea that these events could and probably did happen. Music, even with the obvious elements of exaggeration, make the movie much more shocking and appealing in equal measure. This month marks the release of the newest Martin Scorsese film, Killers of the Flower Moon, a 3.5-hour epic following the Oagi murders and the formation of the FBI to honor the release of another film from one of the all-time great directors. I'll be reviewing one of my personal favorite films, Goodfellas, based on the 1985 non-fiction book, Wise Guy by Nicholas Bly. Goodfellas has been called the second best mob film by The Guardian, only beaten by The Godfather, Part 2. In my opinion, it's not number 2. Goodfellas is a film about the life of Henry Hill, a mobster associated with the Lies crime family in New York City. The film spans 25 years, following Hill as he is introduced to the mob lifestyle and his meteoric rise to the top of the game. The cast is as stellar as they come, with hard-hitting performances from Robert De Niro, James Conway, Ray Liotta, Henry Hill, Lorraine Bracco, Karen Hill, and Joe Pesci. Tommy DeVito, who won an Oscar for the role. Liotta delivers a solid performance as Hill, but the performances of De Niro and Pesci are truly excellent. De Niro plays a suave man who blossoms into a father figure and mentor to Hill. Pesci plays a spontaneous hothead, and you can see not to take your eyes off of what he's done on screen. Although these characters are not the people you want to be friends with, the actors do a great job of making them likable and giving them complex motivations for joining the mob. The story, which follows real-life events, focuses on themes of morality, ambition, and loyalty. Near the beginning of the film, Jimmy Conway gives the young Henry Hill a concise word of advice: never rat on your friends and keep your mouth shut. This suggestion takes Hill a long way as he becomes one of the most trusted members of the Lisa crime family. Loyalty in the mafia is a must, and anyone who goes against the code of loyalty knows death might not be far behind. Scorsese drew from his experiences of growing up on the Lower East Side of Manhattan when directing this film. He wrote the script alongside Plecky, ensuring that the dialogue would be grounded and natural, reflecting the idiosyncrasies of the speech patterns of New York mobsters at the time. What results is realistic dialogue that isn't afraid to interrupt and overlap one another. Because the film spans 25 years, there is a lot of information that has to be condensed down into the 2.5-hour runtime. The pacing is at breakneck speeds, and it never slows down, but it's done in a way consistent with how Hill would have been experiencing life at the time. The gangsters of the time led a cocaine-fueled, fast-paced lifestyle that simply wasn't sustainable. The film does a perfect job of portraying this, especially in the frenetic, paranoia-driven sequence set to Harry and Nelson's jump into the fire. Scorsese thrives in the soundtrack department, using period music to immerse the viewer in the time period that they're rewatching. Scorsese delivers what is, in my opinion, the definitive mobster film, and yes, I've seen The Godfather trilogy. The performances, subject matter, and pacing keep you on the edge of your seat the entire film, and you find yourself rooting for the protagonist, even if his actions might be despicable. Goodfellas is one of my favorite films, and it's quintessentially Scorsese. The pacing, the dialogue, and the music all make this an incredible viewing experience. Goodfellas might be the last true on-a-liner machine gangster movie ever made, as film noir and mafia stories never really left the screen. The a likable gangster style who started with Mario Puzo's Godfather is something that left the big screen almost completely, except for The Sopranos, owned HBO along with The Wire. It's something sadly seen as cliché and over with. The Goodfellas are Henry Hill, Ray Liotta, Jimmy Conway, Niro, and Tommy DeVito Pesci. Three friends with who are trying to make it in the criminal underworld without being members of the mafia. They are mainly robbers, stick-up men, and good earners to their boss Paul Sorvino. Goodfellas narrator is Henry, who starts as a teenager impressed by the success and the glamorous lifestyle of older Jimmy Conway. He will rise and fall through the ranks of the local mob as the Cicero family has hard time to adapt to the new realities of the underworld. In typical earlier Scorsese style, Goodfellas could almost be a stage play due to the complexity and the shy, distant camera of many scenes. In family saga fashion, its action scenes are satellite to many meals, reunions, and simply group discussions that makes the narration go forward. Compared to newer stuff like The Departed or Shutter Island, it feels stripped, almost novel-like, but you can appreciate the subtle pacing and the hard-nosed scenes that always define the Italian-American director. Acting is also what makes a good part of this movie. Joe Pesci plays his first small man syndrome character and arguably his best. A role that he will keep doing again and again over the nines. Tommy DeVito's scary, borderline psychopathic, and Pesci's slapstick performance gives it great credibility. Robert De Niro is outstanding as Jimmy Conway, bringing depth, intelligence, and quiet authority to the role of the older, wiser, and more experienced gangster. Ray Liotta also delivers one of the finest performances of his career as Henry Hill. As Henry's life spirals out of control in the film's final act, Liotta brilliantly captures the overwhelming fear, paranoia, and emotional collapse of a man whose world is falling apart. Like Joe Pesci, however, this remains a career-defining performance that he never quite surpassed. Goodfellas arrived at the end of an era shaped by classics like The Godfather and Scarface, films that explore the personal lives of powerful gangsters. Some critics argue that Goodfellas shares similarities with those earlier masterpieces and reflects a certain exhaustion within the genre. However, the film establishes its own identity through its compelling portrayal of friendship, loyalty, and betrayal in the criminal underworld, as well as Joe Pesci's unforgettable blend of explosive violence and dark humor. While it follows a familiar gangster formula, it injects enough energy, realism, and personality to stand apart. Even if parts of the story feel predictable, it remains a film that's well worth revisiting. If you're looking for a movie to stream tonight, your search can end here. Martin Scorsese's 1990 gangster masterpiece Goodfellas is an outstanding choice and remains one of the greatest crime films ever made. Scorsese's stylish, gritty, and surprisingly emotional story follows the life of mob associate Henry Hill, played brilliantly by Ray Liotta. Widely regarded as one of the finest gangster films in cinema history, many even rank it alongside or above the first two Godfather movies. The film is based on the non-fiction book Wise Guy by Nicholas Pileggi, who co-wrote the screenplay with Martin Scorsese. Both the book and the film chronicle the true story of Henry Hill, a longtime associate of the Lucchese crime family. Fascinated by the mafia from an early age, Henry gradually rises through the ranks of organized crime, embracing both its rewards and its devastating consequences. Through Henry's perspective via those of the people closest to him, the audience experiences the excitement, danger, and inevitable downfall that come with life in the mafia. For fans of Martin Scorsese, Goodfellas represents the director at the peak of his creative powers. He reunites with longtime collaborator Robert De Niro, who delivers another unforgettable performance as seasoned gangster Jimmy Conway. Then there's Joe Pesci, whose portrayal of the volatile and dangerously unpredictable Tommy DeVito remains one of the most iconic performances in film history. Equal parts terrifying and darkly hilarious, Tommy is a character audiences never forget. In classic Scorsese fashion, the brutal world of organized crime is presented with remarkable realism, balanced by moments of sharp, dark comedy. His attention to detail and commitment to authenticity make every scene feel genuine, immersing viewers in the daily lives of career criminals without glamorizing their actions. Over the years, Goodfellas has become the benchmark against which modern gangster films are measured. Through masterful storytelling, innovative filmmaking techniques, and unforgettable performances, the film earned 6 Academy Award nominations, with Joe Pesci winning the Oscar for Best Supporting Actor. Many consider Pesci's performance as Tommy DeVito to be one of the greatest supporting performances ever captured on film. He dominates every scene with explosive energy, portraying a man who is essentially a ticking time bomb at any moment. His charm can transform into terrifying violence, keeping both the characters and the audience constantly on edge. His Academy Award win was more than deserved. To prepare for their roles, Ray Liotta, Robert De Niro, and Joe Pesci devoted themselves to extensive research. Although Jimmy Conway and Tommy DeVito were dramatized versions of real people, all 3 actors worked hard to ensure their portrayals remain grounded in authenticity. They spent considerable time speaking with Nicholas Pileggi and received additional background information that wasn't included in the book, allowing them to build richer and more believable characters. That dedication is one of the key reasons Goodfellas feels so authentic. Of course, it also features one of the most memorable cooking scenes in movie history, proving that even hardened gangsters have moments of ordinary life amid the chaos. Throughout the film, Henry, Jimmy, and Tommy are driven by ambition and an endless desire for power and respect. Each man wants to climb higher within the mafia and become untouchable. For Henry, however, true acceptance is impossible because he is not of full Italian heritage, preventing him from ever becoming a fully initiated member. The film makes it clear that the life of a mobster is built on violence, deception, greed, and betrayal. While the wealth, status, and excitement may seem appealing, they always come with devastating consequences. Ultimately, Goodfellas serves as a powerful reminder that ambition pursued through crime can only lead to destruction. Lorraine Bracco also deserves enormous praise for her exceptional performance as Karen Hill, Henry's wife. She portrays a woman struggling with the emotional damage caused by her husband's criminal lifestyle, delivering a performance filled with vulnerability, anger, and heartbreak. Karen feels like a real persona, someone trapped between love, fear, and desperation. Watching her performance, it's easy to see echoes of Margot Robbie's Naomi Belfort in Scorsese's The Wolf of Wall Street. Although both characters are based on real women, Bracco's unforgettable portrayal undoubtedly helped shape the emotional blueprint for similar roles in later Scorsese films. Martin Scorsese's bold, energetic, and meticulous directing style shines throughout Goodfellas. His inventive storytelling, dynamic camera work, and remarkable ability to immerse viewers in his character's world make the film a cinematic masterpiece. Every scene reflects his passion for the subject matter, creating a story that feels deeply personal while remaining one of the most influential crime films ever made. One of the most unforgettable moments in Goodfellas is the legendary tracking shot through the Copacabana nightclub, set to "Then He Kissed Me by the Crystals," filmed in a single continuous take. The scene perfectly showcases Martin Scorsese's confidence as a filmmaker and his complete command of the story's world. The fluid camera movement places viewers directly alongside Henry Hill, giving the audience the feeling of being an insider in the mob lifestyle rather than simply observing it. These extended, uninterrupted sequences dominate much of the film's first act and symbolize the confidence, control, and excitement Henry experiences during his rise in organized crime. Another powerful example is the scene where Henry calmly walks across the street to confront Karen's neighbor. With no cuts, the sequence emphasizes Henry's growing sense of authority and invincibility. As the story progresses, however, Scorsese deliberately shifts his filmmaking style. The long takes give way to shorter scenes filled with rapid cuts, restless camera movements, and chaotic editing, reflecting Henry's mental collapse and increasingly unstable life. Goodfellas is one of the most influential gangster films ever made. It fully deserves the acclaim it has received over the years and is widely regarded as a film that should have won the Academy Award for Best Picture, ultimately losing to Dances with Wolves. Since the success of Mean Streets, Martin Scorsese has built a reputation for telling gangster stories that humanize criminals while challenging the glamorous Hollywood image of the mafia. His films offer a more authentic and nuanced portrayal of the Italian-American experience, and that vision reached its peak with his 1990 masterpiece, Goodfellas. Rather than presenting organized crime as larger than life, Goodfellas feels like a deeply personal home movie from inside the mafia. Its remarkable sense of authenticity and intimacy sets it apart from nearly every other gangster film. Instead of focusing on familiar genre stereotypes, the movie explores the lives of ordinary people drawn into the criminal underworld and the consequences of the choices they make. The story follows New York mobster Henry Hill, tracing his journey from a working-class childhood to his rise through the ranks of organized crime and, eventually, his downfall due to drug trafficking. From the moment he can remember, Henry dreams of becoming part of the mafia. However, once he earns his place as a mid-level gangster, he quickly discovers that the lifestyle is far less glamorous than he imagined. Unlike The Godfather, which largely centers on powerful crime bosses and the luxury surrounding them, Goodfellas focuses on the lower-ranking mobsters who carry out dangerous jobs while enjoying only a small share of the rewards. This perspective makes the story feel more grounded, realistic, and relatable. The film's relentless pace is driven by Thelma Schoonmaker's brilliant editing and the energetic screenplay by Nicholas Pileggi and Martin Scorsese. Together, they create a fast-moving, non-linear narrative bursting with energy from beginning to end. Scorsese employs virtually every cinematic technique available: freeze frames, direct addresses to the audience, voice-over narration, energetic montages, and carefully choreographed long takes to immerse viewers in the chaotic rhythm of mob life. The soundtrack is equally unforgettable, blending classic songs from artists such as Tony Bennett, The Shangri-Las, Bobby Darin, Cream, and Muddy Waters. Every song is carefully chosen to enhance the mood and capture the changing emotions of each scene. Working alongside cinematographer Michael Ballas, Scorsese ensures that every shot serves a purpose. Early in the film, young Henry watches neighborhood gangsters through his window in a shot inspired by Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho, emphasizing his fascination with their world. Later, Scorsese uses a subtle dolly zoom during Jimmy Conway's diner scene to visualize his growing paranoia as the walls seem to close in around him. During Henry's cocaine-fueled breakdown, extreme close-ups, rapid editing, frantic camera movements, and a constantly shifting soundtrack place the audience directly inside his anxious state of mind. Goodfellas also established the blueprint for Scorsese's later gangster epics, including Casino and The Irishman. More than a crime drama, it serves as a cautionary tale, reminding audiences that a life of crime inevitably ends in tragedy. For mobsters, there are only two possible outcomes: a violent death or a lifetime spent fearing one. The ending reinforces this message perfectly. Henry survives, but his reward is a dull suburban existence where he must constantly look over his shoulder. The film's opening half seduces viewers with the excitement, wealth, and privilege of mafia life, just as Henry himself is seduced. The famous Copacabana tracking shot, where Henry bypasses the front entrance and escorts Karen through the kitchen to an exclusive table by the stage, makes the lifestyle appear irresistible. Yet the second half strips away that illusion, revealing the devastating consequences that follow. After the murder of maidman Billy Batts, Henry's world slowly begins to unravel until everything collapses around him. The performances are exceptional across the board. Ray Liotta delivers one of the finest performances of his career, portraying Henry Hill with charm, vulnerability, and increasing desperation. Lorraine Bracco gives Karen emotional depth, capturing both her love for Henry and the pain of watching him destroy himself. Robert De Niro subtly hides Jimmy Conway's ruthless nature beneath a warm and friendly exterior, while Paul Sorvino conveys Paulie's authority and intimidation with little more than a glance. Joe Pesci delivers the film's most unforgettable performance as Tommy DeVito, earning a well-deserved Academy Award for Best Supporting Actor. His explosive combination of humor, unpredictability, and terrifying violence makes Tommy one of cinema's greatest gangster characters. Remarkably, Goodfellas balances brutal crime with razor-sharp comedy, creating a film that is as entertaining as it is disturbing. The film opens with three gangsters driving into the countryside to dispose of a body in their trunk, only to discover the victim is still alive. From that shocking opening to its unforgettable conclusion, Goodfellas never loses its intensity, dark humor, or emotional impact. Alongside Taxi Driver and Raging Bull, Goodfellas stands among Martin Scorsese's greatest achievements. Together with The Godfather and The Godfather Part 2, it remains one of the finest gangster films ever made. Directed by Martin Scorsese, Goodfellas was written by Nicholas Pileggi and Martin Scorsese, based on the Pileggi's non-fiction book Wise Guy. The film was produced by Irwin Winkler and stars Ray Liotta, Robert De Niro, Joe Pesci, Lorraine Bracco, and Paul Sorvino. Michael Ballas served as cinematographer, while Thelma Schoonmaker handled the editing. Produced and distributed by Warner Brothers, the film premiered on September 9, 1990. It has a running time of 146 minutes, was produced in the United States in English, had a budget of approximately $25 million, and earned around $47.1 million at the worldwide box office.